Good morning, everybody. I call to order the Public Transport Committee for the Regional Council. Just as a preliminary, please put your phones on silent. And we all know where we go if there's an earthquake or whatever, or a fire. We're meeting over the other side of the road. And you get the quickest way there, which is straight out the window. Good luck with that. So the timelines today, we should have this meeting finishing around midday, and we'll just take a half-hour break for lunch, and then we get straight into the workshop, and we've got the workshop scheduled to finish at 2:45. If it's any later than that, I've told Amanda that rather than Lyle, she'll be the chair. Because I have to go to Wellington. So we'll just keep it moving. Can I just do the official little bit here, the chair's statement? I remind the committee members and advisors that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate, decision-making, and encouraging openness and transparency. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council staff, and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. With that happy note, I've called for apologies, and the apologies I have it so far as Chairman Doug Leader, NZTA Susan Collins and Gary Maloney, and I have an apology for lateness for Councillor O'Brien, and Mayor Tapsell and Matamana McDonald are both on Zoom. Thank you. So any other apologies? Being none. You're going to move those apologies. Thank you, sir. And seconded by Councillor Thurston. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Order of business, there are no changes. Public forum, there is none. Items not on the agenda or late, there are none. Declarations of conflict. Pardon?
Can we add items not on the agenda?
Have you given notice to?
Oh, I haven't. It's come up in the last day.
Well, yeah, but
okay. Well, I'll discuss it during I'll find a slot, but it's a bit urgent. So
is it? No, that it's just, yeah, we'll use discretion on it. We'll try to slot it in. Otherwise, we'll do it in the workshop, which doesn't have a firm agenda. But anyway, so that's good. Are there any conflicts of interest? There are none. Just on that items, Glenn, just in future, just as long as you give them some warning, even if it's 6 hours is okay, just in case they have to bear anything, so that we don't want anyone blindsided. Okay. So we move on to confirmation of the minutes on page 8.
Good. Happy to move.
Who was that? Councillor Thurston is happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Isles. So that's all those in favour of that, please say aye. Against, carried. Are there any matters arising that anyone wants to raise? There being none, we'll move straight on then to the first presentation, and that is the Arataki report, I think. Simon. Look at that, we've made up 5 minutes already this morning. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just waiting for the report to come up on the screen here. For those that don't know me, I'm Simon Bell, the Manager of Transport Operations. So the PT Arataki report, which I guess we'll broadly take as read, but I do have a presentation with some summary items on it, which I'll go through just now. This report covers the performance monitoring for the period ending 30 June 2025, and it's on page 18 of your agenda. So just starting at the highest level, patronage for all services excluding Matakana Ferry, we had a bumper year. We had 3.371 million boardings. The headline number was fantastic. We met our target, and we had the strongest Q1 on record. Following that, though, we had 3 consecutive quarters of decline, quarter on quarter. So, and year on year for the same quarters, unfortunately. So for Q4, which was 1 April to 30 June this year, we had 860,000 boardings, which was down 3.2% on prior year. Now, a similar trend has been seen across the entire network. So we'll go into the various regions shortly, but that's across the board. So following those 3 quarters of declining patronage, we've done a bit of a deep dive to try and understand what's driving this, and see if these trends hold true across the country. I hadn't put the first slide up, but moving on to the second slide, I'll draw your attention to regional patronage across the country. You can see there, this has been indexed from Q1 2023-24 year. The entire country is following the same general trend. In fact, in the last couple of quarters, while we've been declining year on year, we have had a more stable, a slight increase versus when indexed back to Q1 23-24 compared to the other regions. We were very similar to all the regional councils, especially Otago and Waikato, our most similar comparable regions, and even Wellington and Auckland. So what this shows us is that it is definitely a national trend, and we'll dig into the why in a minute. So we did see, if you look at the green dotted line, it's quite hard to see. There's a lot of information on there, but the Bay of Plenty region did see a bigger dip in Q2 24-25, but then we've also seen a steeper growth again following that. And when we say growth, it's for Q4 versus prior quarter, but we're down for the whole year. So I would draw attention to that. And then probably the other point I'd note is that Waikato and Auckland in particular have seen fairly strong growth at the start of this year, largely due, we think, to investment-driven increases with new services and some tweaks to their network over the last 12 to 18 months. So that's probably paying off in their numbers. Moving on. The other factors that we've teased out, I think it becomes no surprise to anybody that we think some wider economic downturn implications are being felt more keenly in our region. You'll note later, Eastern Bay of Plenty, the impact's particularly noticeable. So we've had a look at costs of living, and while that's declining, the trend of costs of living, headline inflation has gone down since 2022. That's cumulative. So the cost of living, and in particular, the first thing to go is probably work travel, discretionary travel. We think that's being felt very keenly in our region. And if you compare on that chart on the screen, headline CPI to food prices, insurance, electricity and rates, and of course, inflationary expectations from people who are doing the traveling, the headline numbers actually don't tell the whole story. Awesome.
Where does that data come from?
That comes from a number of sources, so statistics and some media articles and so on. So it's for that chart in particular is for indicative purposes, which is why it's not in the body of the report.
Councillor.
Where in particular did the insurance electricity rates number, did you leave a one off the front of that? Or? I mean, it's a serious question. Like, do you know? Like, it just seems completely wrong.
That came from media reporting. Yeah. So this again is indicative to sort of show the headline versus the underlying inflation. In fact, it's probably higher, as you note, much higher. So that tells the story. We've got a feeling that again that discretionary travel is quite badly hit by these the people using the services and the impact of these numbers on their bottom line. We've also noticed, and in particular across council and other businesses we're familiar with, the increasing use of flexible working. So a lot of people, following COVID, there was a return to work. We suspect that people are tending to work from home again, especially with the wider transport system perception of delays. Of increased travel time. And then the final point I've noted on there is travel time along key corridors, which I'll go into a bit more, but just some information we received from our colleagues next door showed that Route 40, which you'll see is one of our most problematic missed trips routes on the network, we've seen a 30% increase in travel times along that corridor year on year. And to be specific, that's peak inbound along the corridor.
Do we have any idea why? Like 30% seems astounding on that route. I mean, I know we're going to be working on it, but it just seems a mind-boggling number.
Through the chair, I'm not involved in transport modelling, and I'm sure some Taronga City staff would be able to give a more scientific answer. I think we've probably reached the point where the network has started to fail significantly. So you are seeing that exponential decay in travel times. As Simon alluded to, along the Hewletts Road corridor, we have seen, I'm not sure if you've got the absolute numbers of minutes to transit that corridor in the morning, but it has increased substantially in the last 12 months, which does have a significant impact on the reliability of the bus network and in that part of the city particularly.
Edenia.
Just want to ask around the question about the decline in travel and relating it to cost of living and tough times and so on. From a lay perspective, I'd expect that firstly, work travel would be the last thing that you ditch. I mean, that's essential to keep earning money. And secondly, that I forget myself now. Sorry.
Councillor.
Thank you, Ollie, in terms of explaining perhaps the rationale. But the Hewletts Road corridor that you mentioned, is that from Timanga through to the bridge, or is it just Hewletts Road? Because there's a bus lane there.
Through the chair, I'm not sure if I misspoke or you misheard, Councillor. I was talking about the 15th Avenue Turret Road corridor in from Welcome Bay. So sorry if I misspoke.
But if I may, I just remember, so public transport should be cheaper. So that should save you money. So is there any research or understanding, from a more global perspective about what cost of living does to public transport?
So under cost of living pressures through UChair, discretionary activities are those things that disappear first. So discretionary travel is something that people are likely to think more closely about. What we're seeing with flexible working is that traveling for work for many people has become more and more discretionary. So people can actually save money by staying at home and working from home, and an increasing number of employers are facilitating that.
Councillor Neves first, and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Just to check, there's very, very many ways that people use the transport network. Does Taronga City Council do assessments of how many people are biking or using e-scooters, etc.? Because that may be picking up some of the public transport. I'd just quite like to know whether you're reporting on, whether you're monitoring and reporting on the use of your cycleways, since they did cost quite a bit of money and take up quite a bit of road space.
I think the absence of staff to answer it more comprehensively. it's something I have requested that we have more frequent updates on that. I got some data, but they've got quite limited analysis of that. So I agree, it would be good to have more robust numbers, but I would suggest that it's not large numbers in the scheme of things. And you can tell that by looking at household travel survey and some of those, that we're still not talking really significant growth, mainly because the cycleways were not put in, only little strips of cycleway.
On that,
Scott first. Scott
oh,
first.
sorry.
Just, and anecdotally, since the parking fees have gone up further away from the CBD, there's not as many cars parking there. Post these numbers, have we seen any uptick?
Really?
Through the chair, we'd need to come back to you on that one. We can have a look.
Just following on from Simon there, anecdotally, yes, we did receive a significant uptick in people inquiring about public transport options, asking how they got a B card. It's a bit early to start to see that come through in the patronage data. So hopefully, as we go into the new triennium, we'll be able to see the implications of that. We anticipate that will be a significant lever in terms of encouraging people towards the bus network.
Thank you. Keep going. Oh, sorry, Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. My question carries on from Councillor Nees, really, because I think it's a critical one. There's been a massive investment in active transport and nationally a move to encourage national transport, active transport. We in this region, particularly in Tauranga City, have made a huge investment in cycleways. So I just want to be assured that there is a monitoring system, there is a measurement of what that shift in use might be, or do we not know at this stage?
I'll try to answer that, and others can chip in. I don't think there has been a really big investment in the scheme of things in Tauranga. Having looked at the numbers, it's
Well, we spent a lot of money, but
not really on cycleways. That's the issue. We had a lot of money in budgets before our elected council came on, but when you look at what was delivered over the previous 6 years, which is what's talked about with the Labor-led governments, that there was a little strip of cycleway in Otamotai. There was a safety improvement on a shared pathway on Totara Street. And then, of course, there was the much talked about Cameron Road Stage 1, but there's not been any connected cycleway network. There's been far, far less investment into cycling compared to almost every other New Zealand city, including places like New Plymouth, Napier, Hastings, etc. have had more per dollar spent on CapEx and transport. Tauranga has spent incredibly small amounts. So I think that's the issue. We don't monitor it closely. We haven't had a report to it that I report to our joint transport committee. We don't have a transport committee, hasn't come to our city delivery committee. So I think it's something which is not closely looked at. And I agree, it would be nice to see what the trends are.
Can we put that as a request to staff and you know, whichever staff is involved to do that? But we do need to know. Anecdotally, I walk a dog regularly. I try to walk it at around the end of the day, and I can tell you, cycling. You know, I could count the number of cyclists on one hand that I come across. So this is not a cycling town, and it's just the way it is. At the moment, you know, it's not conducive for cycling on Cameron Road, even with all the money spent. So people see it as a safety issue. Anyway, we better keep moving on if we're going to be finished by 2:45.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next chart that's on the screen is just showing the mix of patronage by type. I will call out that this is for RITS transactions only, and therefore excludes schools. So you can see there's been a little shift down in the amount of the percentage made up of children versus adults. So Adults are pretty much year on year exactly the same, and seniors are up slightly. So yeah, when schools are built in there, the child actually evens out, and year on year, we've pretty much got the same mix of people using the bus. So moving on to Tauranga, and I will go through this quite quickly because we've already signalled the headline impacts on patronage. But just the chart on the top left shows rolling 24 months of data. The Q4 patronage on the whole for Tauranga network is down 1.1% on the same quarter prior year. Full year patronage is up 16.7% on prior year due to that strong Q1 patronage and high school patronage. Specifically in urban, the Q4 result was down 10.8% on the prior quarter last year. And full year patronage is only 5.2% down, again, due to that very strong Q1 growth. In terms of missed trips, the chart on the bottom left of the screen, the fourth quarter of the financial year saw an average of 215 trips dropped per month, which is only 0.94% of total planned trips. So this is a 29.6 reduction on the previous quarter.
Councillor,
Oh.
sorry.
Brother, I just wanted to check with those, because they're concentrated, it seems quite evenly on three routes as the worst ones. I'm just trying to understand, like, are they dropped out because of driver factors, or because of buses getting held up in congestion, or for other reasons? Because the reason for it is sort of significant. Do you have that data available?
Through the chair, yes, we have. We do collect that information. So typically they are dropped these days due to traffic. And I would signal that it's a compounding effect. So that trip that gets delayed on the peak route, peak time on, say, Route 40, which is the standout here, will compound throughout the day due to the way our duties are blocked together. And driver feedback, we did do a quick survey, and that is their feedback as well, that just flows on throughout the day.
I guess my point is that 60 is also just as impacted as 40, and I can understand 15th turret, but that other route, it's just interesting to see what's happening on the network as a result of those impacts.
Through the chair, we do collect it at a very granular level. We don't surface it in this report. It used to be that driver unavailability was the key impact back in 2022. We've reduced that right down, and it now is, I'd hesitate to put a percentage on it, but by and large, traffic induced.
Just adding to Simon's response there, for those three routes, particularly 40 is delays in the Turret Road corridor. 1 is congestion, predominantly around Fraser Cove. Gets quite busy there. The 60, we're increasingly seeing delays servicing schools in the afternoon. So congestion around the Otomotai schools, which has knock-on effects for then later running Route 60 services.
Can I just say, Simon, that as Tauranga City moves towards work on the Turret Road, Welcome Bay route, where we know we're going to have a major problem, staff might need to look at the scheduling of bus services, adjusting. You've got a problem now. You imagine what the problem is likely to be once it starts, and it will require, I think, some scheduling adjustments. And rather than, otherwise the whole thing will come to gridlock, and we'll be in big trouble. So we need some flexibility in the system, especially once any work starts on Turret Road, let alone Cameron Road 2, stage 2.
Through the chair, yes, we're leaning into that now ahead of time, working with our colleagues next door around mitigations. As to network resilience, we don't have a mandate to spare money on network improvements at this stage, so we're working through other options.
Yep.
Moving on to schools, it would come as no surprise that schools is the predominant driver in the Tauranga network for patronage increase, especially, well, even in Q4, we had 16.7% up on prior year Q4. And full year patronage for schools was 12.4% up on prior year. On demand, we do have a slide here, but I won't go too deeply into this because we have more fulsome paper coming up. But at a high level, Q4 patronage was 4% down on prior quarter. But there was a 9.2% increase on same quarter prior year. I would signal though that was during the growth onboarding stage of on demand. The fare increases on this part of the network went live on 28th of April. And while we did see a bit of a dip following that, we have seen more recent weeks stabilize back up to pre-fare rates. And then in terms of the mix, predominantly adults with children now having to pay to use on demand at all times. Utilization, we have been doing some refinement on the service to this end, and that is to reduce the vehicle kilometres run without riders on board. And we continue to focus on that with limited levers, other than pulling buses off, which obviously increases customer waiting time. So not really feasible at this stage.
Simon, can I ask, we collect, one of the big comments that your public make is there are empty buses running around. Do we collect data on other bus routes about how much of the time buses are empty?
We have very substantial patronage reporting available, and part of that picture is utilisation. We're still building that picture, and we don't surface it through this particular report.
So through the chair, a metric that we are proposing to introduce into the next regional public transport plan is around peak vehicle utilisation, Councillor Scott, which would speak to that exact point. The other thing that I'd just add is, while Simon's right, we do have a lot of data to whittle that back to individual services and people on board individual buses. That's not something that we have at our fingertips. It can be done, but it currently requires a lot of manual analysis. But as we transition to NTS, we'll have much more functionality and be able to dive into the data in much more detail and a much more efficient way.
Councillor Nees.
Well, thank you. It's a bit more recent than this data, but I had very good feedback from people that were attending the AIMS Games with regard to the free buses. Have you any indications of what the patronage was over the period of the AIMS Games?
Through the chair, I believe, this is anecdotally at this stage, we had 3,500 trips taken on those services. Yeah, but they're very, very well subscribed.
It was the Rotorua slide coming up, which is now being taken down, but I've got a few comments there.
Yep.
Moving on to the Rotorua network, again, the same trends broadly affect Rotorua. Q4 patronage was down 9.1% on the same quarter last year, and full year patronage was down 4.9% on full year last year. The average missed trips has reduced from per month, apologies, from 87 to 61. So that's a 29.2% reduction in missed trips. And again, anecdotally, that is due to traffic impacts through operator reporting. And again, those roadworks we have called out previously are due to local roadworks and state highway roadworks, in particular reduced speeds and increased congestion.
So, Chairman, with regards to Rotorua, I acknowledge your worships here and Councillor O'Brien, but can you just do a deeper dive into driver availability and your concerns there, and also in terms of traffic congestion being a major contributor? is it actually short-term earthworks or is it a perceived long-term issue for the Rotorua district? So driver availability first, Simon, if you can.
Through the chair, driver availability, as far as I'm aware, we're operating at full establishment plan in that part of the network.
Just adding to that and answering the second part of your question, Councillor Thurston. So that network is relatively long in the tooth. Traffic conditions have deteriorated in Rotorua since that timetable was set. And what that is leading to is some strains around drivers' maximum driving times, which means that if drivers do get held up in traffic, they sometimes then have to drop a trip to take their mandated rest. So we are seeing increasing instances of that occurring. What we've been trying to understand with the operator is they have to put a reason against a drop trip. So when they drop a trip because of traffic, is that because the bus was stuck in traffic, or is it because the driver had to take a break because they went over, well, got close to their maximum driving time because of traffic? So we're hoping that as we move into the next triennium, we'll be able to have a better or a more accurate understanding of exactly what the causal factor of those delays is.
Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you. Just regarding the traffic, if it is genuine traffic, which to be fair, we don't have much of, the running joke's always been you can get anywhere in Rotorua in 10 minutes. But do they indicate where that may be? Because we have had significant upgrades to State Highway 30 on the east side, which may have caused some delay, but then also on the other side in Ngongataha on State Highway 5, we have for quite some time had requests. I know we've got the slip lane in there, but have had requests for improvements there, which is probably one of the few areas that we do get congestion during really busy times. Is there any indication of whereabouts this traffic is occurring? Because it is quite unusual to hear that there's congestion in Rotorua, to be honest. And I have one further question.
Through the chair, so we experienced fairly significant impacts through the works on Tainai Road, but I acknowledge that those are now complete. I think the issue here is that the timetable operates on very, very tight margins because this is a timetable that's relatively long in the tooth. So relatively small delays on the network can compound quite quickly into a driver having to drop a trip because of driver hours. But as I mentioned in my response to Councillor Thurston, it's something that we are exploring to understand in greater detail so we can understand what our response is to bring some stability to this timetable.
Okay, thank you. And just regarding State Highway 5 in Ngongataha, I would be interested in future, maybe to have a discussion around if there has been, or if some of the missed trips are an impact of the congestion that we do face there. Otherwise, around our network, it seems okay, especially in the neighbourhood areas. Final question, I'm just curious as to why Murupara and Ruatahuna are included in the Rotorua network, as this is part of the Whakatane district.
Through the chair, I think that's part of that relates to the way we build our bus units for NZTA reporting. And so they were bolted on to Rotorua, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, just making sure that people are aware that it is part of Whakatane district, although as part of the general electorates, it is Rotorua. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually East Coast. Yeah, anyway, may just want to look at that in future. We only go to a bit of Kaingaroa. Thank you.
Moving on.
Okay, so moving on to the Western Bay and Eastern Bay combined. Western Bay, which is essentially our northern corridor and the Waihi Town connector, Q4 patronage was 13.3%. down on same quarter prior year, and full year patronage was down 5% on full year last year. And moving on to Eastern Bay, Q4 was down 23.3% on the same quarter last year. However, full year patronage is 11.6% down. Now it would be pure supposition, but arguably those cost constraints that we talked about at the start are possibly felt. more impactfully down there.
Councillor Campbell,
Yes, look,
speaker on, is it?
sorry. One comment there. Discussions with in Kawerau eyesight and that there's definitely been a drop in patronage since we've changed to Wednesday, Friday. You may not know this, but
Speak into your mic.
you may not know this, but most people in Kawerau are paid on a Tuesday, Thursday, and therefore it's out of sync with them. So that was a concern to them. And that's why there may be a drop there. Just something to reflect on. Thank you.
Councillor Shirley, Councillor Isles after that.
Yes, with the Eastern Bay, I noticed from the report that the route from Whakatane to Apotiki was going to change, and instead of going through Taniatua and Waimana, was going to go down the coast route. Is that right? And if so, what's the impact on those communities that will effectively be bypassed?
Yeah, through the chair, that's a potential proposal, but we'll look closer at that item. One of the other parts of that proposal is increasing the size of the vehicle that goes out to Potaka, but I'll leave that detail out until we get to that item when Dale comes up to present on it, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to further, we still have that service operating through the likes of Waimana. But again, the concern from Whakatane perspective is these big buses that are going around with literally 2 or 3 people in them most of the time. So again, I'll wait to speak to that report a bit later on. But yeah, it is a concern. And to see that the numbers are literally back to the 22-23 stats is quite disappointing. Bearing in mind, again, the cost of living impact across a lot of our district.
I just had an answer on previous question about monitoring of cycling and scootering. Tauranga City does record those things on the main routes. I've asked for those figures to be shared with your staff here.
Moving on to total mobility and accessibility concession. So total mobility is in Q4 had 39,051 trips, which is up 12.4% on prior quarter and 17.4% on the same last year. In terms of full year impact, we've had a 21.4 increase on full year 23-24. Accessibility concession, we've had
just before you finish total mobility, Whakatane seems to have had a huge increase in currently by comparison to others. Is there any reason for that?
Through the chair, I'll have to revert to you later on that one, if you don't mind. We have had an increase in matata of 44.6% on prior quarter. That may be an impact on there. Apologies, I need to speed it up a little bit.
Yeah, Councillor Isles.
I can probably give the answer to the question. Waka Eastern Bay, last month we did 595 movements, of which 450 were total mobility. We've got to the stage now, unfortunately, where we're going to have to decline passengers because our 4-fleet vehicle is at max. So it is something that is really, and of course with one less, in the total mobility space, it's putting more pressure on our voluntary service.
Through the chair, to that point, we are investigating a new supplier in the area for total mobility services. So accessibility concession, we've had a 21.4% increase for the same quarter, and total trips taken were 23.7% higher than last year. Staying on total mobility, this chart simply shows the contract costs by funding source, so it doesn't contemplate the passengers' share of the payment. which again is 25%, with the remainder of the 75% made up by BOPRC, Whakatahi and surf funding. Just quickly on here, the trend for customer services tickets created remains downwards. It's 22.6% lower than last quarter four. And public transport is 39% of total calls received into council. The reason this is important is because despite the network issues, our complaints are remaining relatively stable. Finally, moving on to the summary of financial performance, and I will caution that this is unaudited. We're waiting on annual report to be signed off yet, but that we have had a favourable variance for operating expenditure of 16.5 million, which has a revenue offset of 7.24 million down, 7.024 million down. Now, the point there is that part of that is Whakatahi funding. So if we don't spend the money, the funding doesn't come in as revenue. A good portion of the savings is down to staff holding operators to account for cost control. We were asked to be more prudent, and this is reflected in the cost reduction. And then in terms of underspend, this goes to reserves and is basically reflective of our instruction to act diligently and realise some savings, which is shown in these results.
Councillor Lees.
Just about that, the accumulation of funds and the reserves mean that the targeted rate for the following year can be offset, can be reduced. Is that part of the plan?
So through the chair, that will be an option available to the regional council through the preparation of the next annual plan.
And we do have to keep in mind Tauranga is the biggest expenditure item in public transport, and there is going to be major disruption in the coming 12 months, I'm predicting. So we might need some bit off, because we could have reduced revenue in that while that work is happening on Tarrant Road, for instance. Yep, Councillor.
You know what the private share was for the year?
I don't have that to hand, but we can certainly get back to you very shortly with that.
Councillor Crowther.
I'm just wondering, do you have two questions? One is, am I correct looking at last year's numbers that we're talking about 51 million gross expenditure last year? It was presented with sort of net costs, but are we sort of slightly up in actual terms across the region? And I guess the second question from that is, given that, as the chair just said, Tauranga is a big component of that. Last year it was 30.5 just for the course Tauranga services, let alone the share of the other costs. So where are we tracking in terms of the Tauranga share this time?
So as Simon mentioned, we're still waiting for our final year numbers to be endorsed through the annual report. Things in Tauranga have increased broadly in line with everything else. So your broad trend analysis, Councillor Crowther, would hold true there. What I would say is, and I'll go into this a bit more in a later item, is there are a couple of different things that drive costs when it comes to our contracts. There's the base contract cost, but then embedded into those contracts is contractually defined inflation. So that increasing cost that you see year on year is almost entirely down to inflation. It's not down to additional dollars going into the service delivery.
Through the chair, that was the final slide. So open to any questions.
I think. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Apologies for talking out of order.
I'm on a new screen today, so I'm trying to find everything online. Could I just go back to the Rotorua issue, if you don't mind? If I could just support what Mayor Tapsell said. I also find it slightly strange that we keep giving the reason for roadworks for the dropouts and some of the Rotorua results, particularly on East Side, where you have the number 3 bus, which is Linmore and Ofota, and I wonder why the number 10 bus that goes out to the airport isn't similarly affected. And secondly, yes, I appreciate the Kotu number 6 and also the number 11 out to Tohua Mai via Te Ao Tonga, both coming onto major roads. But one of the concerns I have is that I see what to my eye seems to be an increasing number of non-city ride buses being used, and I actually wonder if the actual age of the actual buses, etc. Many of the buses, for example, I get on, the bells don't work, and there's stickies all up, pieces of paper taped to 6 or 7 entire one side, saying the bells don't work. I hear from drivers that often buses are swapping parts, and I just actually wonder whether if we didn't actually have more better pinpointed information on where those traffic causes, i.e. is it between 8 and 9, is it between 3 and 4, if we had better info around that, probably it would help us have a bit more understanding of what that actual issue is. I think there's an element here, there could be an element where this is just being used as an excuse. And I think we probably need a deeper dive into this to make sure that the service that we're trying to provide is actually capable of being delivered. Thank you.
Through the chair, but I probably circle back to Ollie's comment about the sensitivity of this network to some slight delays that may be caused by traffic earlier in the day and flowing on through, and the requirement to have driver breaks.
Further to Simon's comments, councillor, there is a need to do a deeper dive here to understand the root cause of the issues we're experiencing in Rotorua. Another thing is that the buses in Rotorua operate across multiple routes. So if a route 3 is delayed, is that because of a delay it picked up on its inbound when it was doing a route 1, for example? So we need to do further work to whittle it right back to the cause of these delays. And your comments around the age of the fleet are noted. Those are things that we'll continue to discuss with the operator and set our expectations around the presentation of that fleet.
All right, thank you, Simon. We'll move on. Chairman's report.
Through the chair, I'll introduce this paper. So, fellow councillors, and it's nice to be here today. So you'll see that the chairman's report has a number of items in there, so I won't go through each of those. And the fares review item, which is touched on, is also part of a deeper dive at item 8.5. Another probably highlight to raise is that the Tauranga Operations Transport Facility is having its concrete poured this week. So that's a good milestone, and we're almost at the end of completing that piece of infrastructure. So it's also been an interesting piece of work to do from a service perspective, because we don't usually get into infrastructure. With regards to the schools review update, we spoke with the joint committee just recently, and we're now working with Papamoa College on activating conversations there, and we will be writing a letter to the college as well, but we've just commenced those conversations. So I'll take the paper as read and open it to the floor.
Questions? Councillor Nees?
The schools review update, I didn't understand the suggestion that you'd just be using one bus for multiple trips. I don't have any knowledge as to what that is going to do to the network and to the timeliness of youth getting to school. I think I read that right. Double trips using a single vehicle. What does that actually mean in practice for the people going to school?
Through the chair, I'll just put Dale on, because he's been the one that's done the review and is quite close to the technical side of it.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. Hopefully I can explain this clearly. So the intention with the double trip was that you'd have one vehicle doing a run for Papamoa College students first thing, talking about the morning trips. So it'd do that run, pick up those children, take them to Papamoa College, then spend 5 minutes heading down the road to do a trip for Mount College students with that same vehicle later in the morning. And there's multiple, I think it was 3 vehicles being used on that route currently. So it would be sharing 3 vehicles doing double trips, if that makes, that's clear.
So what it would mean though is that the Papamoa youth will be getting to school much earlier than the Mount Maunganui youth.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So how much earlier would it be? I mean, are they getting to school at 7 o'clock in the morning or?
It was going to be 10 to 8 that they were arriving. And yeah, that was not supported by the college as discussed in the recent joint committee meeting.
Oh, and then councillor McDennis, sure, I'd say.
Yeah, just clarification on page 48, you talk about priority enhancements for the operational management of total mobility. What are those priority enhancements? Yeah. The last sentence before the heading for security.
Through the chair, that I think we're speaking there to the more operational efficiencies and effectiveness and how we deal with total mobility in-house in terms of working with the operators for the delivery of the service.
So what sort of impact are we talking about for users, if any?
Through the chair, I think that's to be confirmed. We'll to put a more fulsome report in to a later meeting on that one.
Through the chair, just to supplement Simon's explanation there. So we currently use a system called RideWise that underpins our total mobility operation, and it is quite burdensome on staff time. And we've been looking at some internal ways to improve the efficiency of how we work with the RideWise system to deliver the best possible service we can for customers. So there won't be, to say, direct benefits for customers, but we're hoping that that it will improve the efficiency of the way we administer the system. All behind the scenes.
Yeah. Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Shirley. Or did I have Councillor Dennis first? Sorry. Well, Madam Ana, I forgot Councillor Dennis. Sorry, Dennis, McDonald, Shirley, that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regard to 2.3 of the Mount Maunganui parking management plan, is there any view as to what you're going to do it? And I speak from a person that every school holidays have to drag my grandkids up to Mount Maunganui, walk them around the base of the mountain, take them to the hot pools and then give them an ice cream and head out. And is there any thought to park and rides from further out? Because if you had your park and ride further out, you could almost do that trip and then get in your car and go shopping or do what you need to do. Is there any view of doing that?
Through the chair, I might hand you over to city councillors to give you a bit of an insight to that, but park and rides weren't funded through the last RLTP. There was one considered for Papamoa East on Tara Road, but that wasn't supported. And in terms of probably a park and ride closer to the city, I don't think that's feasible or being considered at this stage, but maybe I can add to that.
I was talking about further out by past Bayfair or...
Yeah, so there's one feasibility study completed for one, at Tahara Road, which is next to the main road interchange towards Papamoa East as you head out towards Whakatane, but that's not being funded.
Just supplementing Andrew's response, there has been a reasonable amount of work done into the feasibility of Park and Ride, but that's predominantly been focused on moving commuters into Tauranga CBD, less of a focus on facilitating travel to Mount Maunganui. So as Andrew said, there was a proposed trial which didn't progress, but the regional council also looked very high level at the prospect of Park and Ride at places like Te Puna and Tauriko as well. So those are potential longer term options that could be considered in the future. But as I say, nothing directly supporting them out.
So when staff say it's not funded, that we're talking through NZTA. Okay, they haven't supported it.
That's correct. And through the last annual plan, Regional Council removed funding from the budget for that Park and Ride trial as well.
And to be fair, I suspect that it's only really bad during school holidays when kids insist on dragging their grandparents around the mountain, or in my case, up the mountain last time, which nearly killed me, but that's all right. Thank you.
Now, so we're going to Matamoana, councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak to the item 2.11 in that report, the Matakana Island ferry subsidy options. Firstly, I want to thank staff for their participation in the engagement we undertook with Matakana Island. The other thing that became quite prevalent in this discussion with Matakana Island was the lack of data at the end of the day. Now, I've just seen the report that's been given by staff around the data that's been provided around the full public transport matter. And it is this type of data that was lacking in our ability to assist the owners at Matakana. So I would like, through you, Andrew, that a directive be given to Council to undertake a comprehensive data research into the ferry operations around passengers, but more particularly the passengers that are resident on Matakana Island, so that when we return to the discussion next year around what the island people were requesting, that we have a better information base before we go back to the island. You will see the addendum that data that the residents themselves did, but of course that falls into question about the robustness of that data, because that was just data gathered between, over a period of 1 week. So definitely an issue that needs to be continued. The other issue for us was the time frame in which we were operating and having to get a report back to this committee. It became evident to us too that there needed to be wider consultation with the wider Matapihi and Matakana residents, and not just the representative group that we were dealing with as we got into discussions on the island. So I guess my request to you, Mr. Chair, is a directive to staff to undertake a deeper data process, so that when we return for that further engagement, we have that information behind us. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Yes, we will embark on a more comprehensive data collection process so that we can come back to PTC next year with more substantive options for discussion. But in the meantime, we will continue our conversations and working with the community.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to back up what Councillor McDonald said about the consultation engagement with the community, because looking at the what we resolved previously, I think it was the Tauranga Western Bay Transport Group, it was to engage and consult with a wide cross section of the people there, not just the people who happen to be in the room on that day. So I think there's definite opportunity to expand that, and there's great networks on the islands, and I'm sure that people can help us make that happen.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. My question relates to 2.5 of the Chairman's report, the National Ticketing Solutions, NTS. I see in the final paragraph there, it says integrated planning across the regions underway with a revised regional rollout plan is expected to be confirmed in August. What was that confirmed, given the impact that it could have on patronage and use and flexibility? And also, is there an update on where we're at with the rollout at a national level? Because it's been delay after delay after delay. It's been going on for years. What's the problem? When's it going to happen? And did we confirm ours in August?
Through the chair, I'm sorry to tell you, Councillor Shirley, that we did not receive an updated programme, although we are told we'll be receiving one within the next couple of weeks. In terms of a wider update, my understanding is that NZTA are releasing a media release later today, scheduled for 2 o'clock. So there will be a nationwide update on where that programme is. But I'm reliably informed that they have made some changes, undertaken a review, and have a plan to get on and deliver that programme.
It sounds like they'll be announcing a further delay.
Wait till 2 o'clock. The follow-up to that is, what is our contingency plan if it is further delayed? That's the issue, because and this will come up in the fares review question. I don't think we need to have an answer now, because there is a paper on fares review, but we've been waiting a long time. But if you remember, we agreed as a regional council to do the fares review, and that was passed in December last year, and it was all predicated on the NTS being operational, and so let's park that for now. It will come up as a substantive paper. Any other questions? Councillor Crowther. Is your mic going?
We've now got, sorry about that. But an update on a previous point before this, that in terms of cycleway data, that we've now got staff sort of working on sending through something, so we can have that later in the meeting at an appropriate time. But I was just looking through I think we'd requested that information a little while ago, and they've now got a dashboard that they can share, which I think I can check with Sean. Is that available for other elected members from other councils to access? Yeah. No. Oh, internal. Okay, right. So it's an internal dashboard, but we can get the information out. Yeah.
Happy to move receipt of the chairman's report and note its contents, and to be assured that Councillor McDonald's request is going to be embedded in it. Happy to move.
Seconded by Councillor Nees. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So we move now on to the membership update. This could be quite quick.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. This short report highlights an update to the membership following the resignation of Councillor Thompson. Confirms that Councillor Scott has been appointed as the Bay of Plenty Regional Council representative to the Public Transport Committee. The recommendations are on page 54 of your agenda.
Happy to move the recommendations.
Moved by Councillor Thurston, seconded by Councillor Nees. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Welcome, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I was going to second that, but I'm not on the list any longer.
You what?
Through you, Chair, we've just spotted that unfortunate omission, Councillor Campbell. So we will amend. We'll note it in the minutes.
Oh, you're on the list of at the front of the book. That's what happens if you miss a meeting. We're moving on. On-demand bus extension decision.
Thank you, Chairman. And through you, I'll run through a few slides if Amanda's able to put those up just to support the salient points of this presentation. I'll try and be quick because we are running behind slightly. So there's two parts to this paper. Firstly, to present data presented by ABLES and also an update on some data that the RPRC have to fill the gap between, I think ABLES report finished June, so it covers the July-August period. And also for the committee to make a decision on whether it extends the trial beyond April 26 to December 26. So just by way of background, I'll be quick. This trial is already funded by way of Regional Council's annual plan. So we're currently rating a targeted rate for this trial. And in June, the PTC resolved that the metrics identified in the 12-month management report was sufficient and appropriate by way of resolution to enable an extension decision at this meeting. So the committee's seen a number of reports over the past sort of 12 months or so, with a 6 and 12-month report, the updated amendment that's provided today, and also regular updates in Arataki, which we presented earlier. So they should all be considered collectively. But today's decision really is not a financial one because that's been made. It's more around whether the committee is comfortable with the performance of the trial and whether it should be extended to December 26. So just some brief conclusions from ABLES report. The BCR has risen from a cost neutral one of 1.0 to around 1.1, 1.2. So the benefits are now starting to outweigh the cost. We did see a slight dip in patronage due to the fare increase, but that's been largely built back in with demand increasing. There's a maximum theoretical fare box recovery of around 10 to 12%. So we're actually seeing that we're almost at that 10% now. So that's, I guess that's a positive sign, but it also means perhaps there's the ability to do a little bit more in terms of tweaking fares in the future. Vehicle utilisation continues to rise and around 40%. Customer satisfaction remains high, and the social benefits are probably likely to be higher than can be estimated. I'll just jump onto some more recent data from our own staff that supports filling the gap that ABLES wasn't able to fill because that data wasn't available then. So you'll see there was a peak in patronage of about, I think it's 1,122 users for a peak week in April, just before the fares was increased on the 28th of April. So we then saw patronage decline slightly before it starts to return in August, July, August. We've also seen in the most recent week, patronage has actually come back higher than what is there on the graph because we've got the first week of September, which shows just over 1,000. So we're only about 100 short of where we were at our peak. So we've seen that demand come back even though we've increased the fare. So it's a really positive sign and enables us to actually ensure that we're covering as much of the cost as we can. And again, goes back to my earlier point around the potential ability to increase costs again and actually test how the market might respond, because we've noticed the elasticity that we had considered in terms of the impact was around 15%, but we saw a dip around 11%. So we're quite buoyed by the fact that that the response has been quite positive to that shift. So just briefly in conclusion, overall the metrics are looking good. There's some really positive trends. We still feel that we can learn more from the service to maximise its potential. And as I've just mentioned, the elasticity is probably not as sensitive as we'd initially thought. And again, I've repeated myself, but there's a scope for some increase in fares, which we're maybe considering in the new year or new training for many councils. Contract pricing is probably playing quite a key role in the recovery costs, because with it being a trial, those costs are slightly higher. But if it was permanent, they'll probably come down. So I guess just in summary, given the data and reviews undertaken to date, staff consider extending the service to December 26 is worthwhile. But I'll stop there and hand over for any questions. Thank you.
Edenia, followed by councillor Nees, followed by councillor Kurek, followed by councillor Crowther. Anyone else? Sure, we'll go down that line and then come across to you. You're last. Always last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first I'd like to congratulate staff on how well this is running. It seems to be running as well as it can be expected. I really hope we can get a cheaper contract pricing, because that will make a big difference to the fare box recovery, because that is a concern of mine, that the theoretical maximum fare box recovery is only about 10 to 12%, and we're pretty well there now. And you know, when we've been asked by government to reach, I think it's approaching 30%, you know, that's literally impossible to achieve with this service. So with the current parameters. So if there's a cheaper contract, and you know, and the lower price elasticity means that fares could go up a wee bit, we might be able to make some improvement. But it does concern me that at this point it's impossible to make it hit the government's target.
There are some encouraging signs through the chair. So Environment Canterbury have been successful at implementing a permanent on-demand service, and what they experienced going from a trial to a permanent service was a fairly drastic decrease in contract costs. What we have here is a short-term trial. There's an amount of risk for the operator, and that risk is passed on to us. So we would anticipate, if we got to the point where we considered a permanent service, that those costs would be able to decrease somewhat, and then that would increase the theoretical maximum level of fare box recovery.
So we went to Nees, I think, next.
Thank you. I just would like to understand, if you don't mind, how you quantify the user benefits.
Yeah, that's used as through a methodology that NZTA has. It's a monetised benefits manual, and they go through quite a detailed assessment and methodology to get to that point. So it is, yeah, based in theory, and used as best practice for NZTA's evidence-based methodology.
It was a standard methodology,
yeah,
and so it is quite reliable. My other question is around the utilisation rate, and we had a bit of a conversation earlier on that it would be negative for customer service to drop one vehicle, for example, to try and increase utilisation rate. My question is, have we got good data on when the demand is greatest? I mean, do we have to have all the vehicles on the road at the same time? Or can you sort of plan to have, say, 4 at a certain time and 5 at another time?
I think we could, but that's probably getting to an operational level, which may make things a little bit difficult. And I think overall we're seeing utilisation increase and become stronger. So without getting to an operational level, I think it's looking at the signs that are quite positive in that respect. But as part of the trial, and the reason why it is a trial is we can continue to make tweaks and changes, and those are the sorts of things we'll look at, but probably won't be coming back to the committee to kind of look for decisions on that. But yeah, those are considerations that we are definitely looking at, Councillor.
Great, thank you. And then just one more, just there was a bit of a conversation about other users around the country that have pilots. So what is the national picture with regard to pilots? How many have been tried? How many have been dropped? How many have been retained? So it's just helpful to get the wider.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, there's the Timaru is sort of the gold standard. But there's been trials in Wellington, Tawa, area of Wellington, the North Shore, and I'm not sure the status of all of them, but most of those trials have largely ended for various reasons. I think largely due to fare recovery and cost metrics. So I think it's making sure that we're teasing as much out of this trial as we can through those tweaks I've mentioned before, but also looking at ways that we can make sure that this is as successful as possible and learn as much from the trial as we can to make it successful. And perhaps that's even looking at extending the trial into a different area of the region, and the way we look at models, delivery models across the region, how that might suit somewhere else. But it's a massive learning curve. Yeah, but I think
Yeah, I think the other thing to acknowledge is that all of the trials have been different. So in Timaru, they made the decision to replace the whole network with on-demand. In the Waikato, their on-demand has serviced the airports and has provided a night service. And in the Hawke's Bay, they removed a sizable chunk of their urban network whilst they trialled it. Whereas here, we are looking at how on-demand works in an area of the city that's traditionally very hard to service with traditional public transport. So it's quite hard to benchmark the trials against each other because they've all tried to solve different problems. The benefit will come in the round where we're able to put all of these case studies side by side to understand, well, what part can on-demand play in a successful public transport network.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, this service is one that's linked to our fixed services. So not all those trials have been done like that. So Timaru on demand is Timaru wide. It doesn't have any other services. So there's no you don't have to get off one service and onto another. So that dynamic is also an interesting part of the position that we're in. Yeah.
Councillor Curritt.
Thanks, Andrew. Just around price sensitivity and the apparent willingness to pay additional charges. And what I picked up is that this might then become something which could be factored into the overall price increase for the rest of the service. But do you think you could actually compare the two? The two services are totally different. One's a premium service, the other, the price sensitivity around the normal service could be a lot different to the price sensitivity around on demand.
Yeah.
And do you think it's legit that we actually factor that in to the later decision?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair, I think that would be an unwise decision to probably use the on-demand as a tool or a metric to say this will work on a fixed service Tauranga wide. Yeah, you might think that the elasticity response might be as good, but I think it'd be very dangerous to probably go down those sorts of routes with a fixed service that we've got in such an established city as such as Tauranga. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, because it's just something I sort of picked up again, but I was obviously wrong.
Oh, I don't think it's incorrect. I think there's the ability to use different elasticities for different types of models and services. So you're on the right path. It's probably in terms of Ollie's path, he's got a bit better understanding of how this elasticities work with different models. So I'll hand over to him to add any further context.
The only thing I was going to add is I don't think you should use that as a reason not to consider an increase to fixed route service fares, but it would be incorrect to say if we've had this behaviour change on demand, we could expect exactly the same response on the fixed route services.
Yeah, and through the chair as well, I think, as you mentioned, this is a premium service. Is so different to our fixed service, and we started at a very low baseline. The fares that we're charging for on demand were at the same level as the fixed service, so it's $2.72 with the B card, and then we've only just recently increased them, and we're starting to see that the premium service is actually worth a bit more in price, and so that's what we're going to test further going forward. Yeah.
Thank you. That really, you nailed it there, because it was an introductory price, where the others, the set price that's been there for many years, so quite different. Yeah.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, and in terms of the likely cost reduction, was that factored into the operational costs for the 10-year forecast? And if not, what are we looking at in terms of a likely reduction there?
Through the chair, that cost reduction, or those metrics are used based off current contract costs, I think. So that's why the BCR I mentioned earlier was between 1.1 and 1.2, because it depends on where you land with fares or what we did with the contract. So I couldn't probably go into much more than that, because it's a bit of glass ball gazing. I guess linked to that, my
my sources tell me that there are still ongoing issues with electric vehicles out there, with charging, with the range and so forth. And you know, I understand the desire to electrify fleets, but if we haven't got an ideal scenario there, and it is inducing costs into the system, whether it be at our end, or your end, I guess you're paying, at regional council, or whether it be at the contractor's end, pardon me, when we look at what the costs are likely to be, that would be a factor. So have you looked at a lower cost premium service, which doesn't have electric fleet, and doesn't have the time component tied up to having, but my understanding is the vehicles get to the range is supposed to be 170 or something, and then they get down to about 60 and they have to sort of rush and charge up at that point. So you'd overcome some of those barriers, you'd reduce some costs. So has there been another alternative, and even a non-premium service, one that could be a little bit more semi-fixed route?
Yeah, so through the chair, I think they're actually starting that those are really good questions, and probably moving into some of the conversation we can have this afternoon as part of the RPTP, but probably coming back to the crux of the question, I think, which is around the on-demand and being electric and problems with that. We've got charging stations at either end of the geographic scope of it, but also probably more strategically is that by 2035, national fleets have to be decarbonised. So I'm sure we could look at some diesel options between now and then, but then you're going to have to ask the sector to go back to electric buses, and electric buses are what have been built. We're not building diesel buses. So if you want them to be at a decent standard, yeah, stuck in a rock and a hard place.
Another question I had was, in terms of, to Councillor Nee's point, those user benefits, I guess I'm very concerned about seeing just user benefits and not seeing detail on it. So do we have any idea of what that is? And I'll use the example that I've used before in a transport committee meeting, which is the Totara Street cycleway. The only reason that it got approved with a positive BCR was because of health benefits, and yet it was people cycling in the most polluted airshed in New Zealand. So I'm just wondering, you know, what are we talking about there for those benefits? What kind of thing is it?
I think it might be a collection of things. I'm not sure exactly the reference you're pointing to, but it's probably the fact that it's more accessible. We've got people that are in situations where they have to access or are able to access transport more readily. So it's an on-demand service where you can meet at multiple of thousands of technologically generated stops. So I guess, yeah, it's a premium service and it comes with those premium add-ons. So in terms of other user benefits, I think, yeah, a lot of them aren't able to be measured because it's much easier to measure a cost versus a cost, but it's not so easy to measure whether someone likes it because they can get to the hospital.
Yeah, I think the thing I'd add is these are an agreed set of metrics that are used to justify transport investments by governments. We have got a further report that goes into further detail, so we're happy to forward round what's included in the wider benefits, so you can see a breakdown of that and what's included.
That'd be much appreciated. And the last one for now, anyway. In terms of the users, do we have data on how many previously used Uber? Because I'm talking to people who've been involved in the service, running service, and there are a number of people who were quite pleased to have a low-cost Uber service, and to quote what was told to me. So I'm just sort of thinking, do we actually have any data around that, like of what the users previously did, whether they didn't travel, whether they used 51 or used Uber or used Friends or whatever?
Yeah, so through the chair, we know in short, but I think one of the key points to make is that, which we've made before, is that the trips on demand are of a distance similar to Uber, so we can probably assume that the people in that area are using on demand instead of Uber, and that could also probably help to frame up what might be a more appropriate fare increase in time. So yeah, and I think perhaps as part of any survey we do towards the end of the trial, whether that's in April or December, just notably still yet to make a decision, we could look at that because the surveying really is quite high level at this point in time. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Just got to say, I'm just getting over the shock of Councillor Crowther suggesting we use more diesel vehicles.
Yes, I just to be clear, I was just asking for an
But to be fair, Timaru, their service is all diesel vehicles.
Yeah. It's probably more the shock of it being Glen.
You got a question?
So I have a couple of questions. Comparing it to Route 51, is that a fair comparison, or is this service going wider and further afield?
Well, I think it's fair in the fact that it's covering similar areas geographically, but financially and in terms of what the two services do, no. So yes and no. So I think if and when the on-demand service ends, would be, well, what did this service do that the 51 didn't, and how do we incorporate a new fixed service into this geographic area, or is it a matter of tweaking some of the existing routes within Tauranga South, because there are a couple of others that go down Cameron Road, and how do we make that change without making too much of a increasing levels of service too much or making it cost too much. So yeah, I hope that answers your question somewhat.
I gather it's a difficult one to actually do a direct comparison on. My second question is about extending beyond March next year. What is, obviously the recommendation is that we do continue on. What are we going to learn that we haven't already learned or won't learn by March that would make this trial carry on for another 6 months?
Yeah, through the chair, I think I've sort of touched on a couple of those points, but I think the main one is really how far can we push the fair cost recovery? Where is that tipping point with putting fares up to, say, I don't know, $5-6 a ride, and when do we start to see that patronage dip, and where is that crossover between those two lines? And we know we've crossed a line when they start crossing over each other again. So I think that's the key one. And then go back to Councillor Nees's point and the conversation we had there around what tweaks we can make operationally, which we do quite regularly in the background, but don't report on them too much, just to make sure that we're fine tuning those to then get to a point where we can say, okay, well, this is what the on-demand service has done for us. How can we take it forward from here, and really give this committee and the regional council something meaty to say we want to put this in permanently, or we don't, or we want to mobilise it to a different area of the region. Yeah.
Before I go to Councillor Shirley, I think it should be really noted how successful, when you compare the 51 route was carrying 300 passengers a month approximately, and so we're getting nearly tenfold that, sevenfold, whatever it is. It's fantastic, but we didn't know, we weren't getting the financial return, and so that's why the trial is important, that we kept it going, and actually worked on the fare recovery, because it's no good having something that's really good patronage but is ridiculously expensive, and so that's why we want more time. Are you? No, but I think we went there and then back to you, didn't I? Can't remember. Oh, you were the last. Okay, yeah. Councillor, Mayor.
A little bit preempted. Just going on to, you're totally fine with me now, the on-demand service for Whakatane. I know the cost, and we've got this literally underutilised public transport network serving Whakatane. At what stage, bearing in mind your comment about possibly extending out to other areas within the region, would we be able to look at this? Do we have to wait for contract renewals in 27 or?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as part of the contract renewal work, we are looking at ways to be creative, particularly in the East. And you'll probably have noted that we have funded a community transport forum, which is looking at how we can potentially change the model in the Eastern Bay to include the likes of Waka, Eastern Bay, and potentially other users, also providers. And then I guess without going too far in terms of what I say is, well, how does that model look in the Eastern Bay with fixed services and then community provided services, but also where does on-demand fit beyond December 2026 or April 2026? So those are questions that we're thinking about, and we are making sure that those conversations or those ideas are being pulled into procurement planning and the length of contracts, et cetera. Yeah.
So it's growing legs. Thank you.
Yeah, your words, not mine. Yeah. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Chairman, I have two questions. First one's a point of clarification. It follows on from Councillor Taylor. I think I heard him say that the staff recommendation is to go to December 26. My understanding from our agenda is that the recommendation 2 is agrees to either A, extended 26, or B, the trial ceases in April. So the choice is left for this committee. It's not a clear recommendation to extend it. That was the clarification I saw on that.
Through the chair, that's correct. So I think we didn't make that point in the paper or in the resolution, and largely it is up to this committee to make the call based off the information you've seen. We want to keep this independent of staff. So yeah, the ball's firmly in your court, but based off what we're seeing in general from all those reports, there looks to be a benefit to continue the trial, but the decision is yours.
So are you changing your recommendation?
It's not a recommendation, it's an observation.
Okay. I loaded. That was a clarification. My question was, getting back to the fare box recovery, I noticed 10% for the on-demand service. How does that compare with the fare box recovery for the fixed route schedule service? And how are we placed at a national level? I think we were the lowest fare recovery in the country, fare box recovery after Horizons. Are we still in that position?
I think we had a question earlier through the chair around what our fare box recovery was citywide or at least region-wide, so we'll have to get that to you. But from memory, the on-demand service is not recovering as much cost as our fixed urban services, and that would certainly change once fares were increased and schools were introduced. But we'll hand to Ollie in case I've missed the mark.
So through the chair, I haven't seen the financial year-end metrics comparing all public transport authorities, so I can't comment as to where we are in the stack. In terms of the on-demand performance, when we last looked at this, so on-demand does sit below the average for fixed route services, but if you disaggregate out the data by fixed route service, on-demand does perform better than some of our lower performing routes.
Do you get a second chance? Yeah, Margaret.
Yeah, second chance. So I heard that it can be compared to an Uber service and potentially some people moving from existing use of Uber to the cheaper on demand. But has there been an exercise in terms of determining around about how the service currently pricing wise compares to an Uber service? With ballpark?
I think through the chair going back, we did actually look at Uber because we knew that there might be some cannibalism of the Uber service as a result of us providing a low cost premium service similar to Uber. So yes, but in terms of going forward, I think we could do more to understand that and then what the price point might be if we did increase fares to reflect that level of competition with Uber, and probably understanding to what extent is Uber actually used in Tauranga South. I imagine comparably to other parts of the city, it might be relatively lower, but that's just an assumption. Yeah.
Is there any understanding as to the propensity or the willingness to transfer using the on-demand service into the big fixed bus service? Because when I spoke to Christchurch, they felt that was a limiting factor for them. The thing with transfers, they said, was you really need to make sure there's really good cover for your people, and they might be prepared to transfer once, but certainly no more.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So international research shows that that changing services is a major detractor when it comes to public transport uptake. The convenience of a one-seat ride is very much valued by customers. We did, when the trial first started, permit free transfers between on-demand and our urban service. But when we did the fares change back at the end of April, we removed the ability to undertake free transfers to acknowledge the fact that it's a premium service. Unfortunately, in the way that we did that behind the scenes, we also lost the ability to easily see where people were transferring. So it is something that we can dig into the data to understand, but we did lose the ability to very quickly look at the number of transfers between services. So we now need to go up and match sort of individual trip IDs to understand where a transfer has taken place. But yeah, you're absolutely right that an interchange does significantly reduce the attractiveness of a public transport trip.
So I think that's all the questions. So we come to the recommendations, and as I'm happy to move that we move to December 26. So I'll put that on the table. So that's moving 1, 2A and 3.
Second, Chairman.
So that's seconded by Councillor Thurston. It's open for discussion. Being no discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
I was waiting for all the regional councils to leap in and discuss it. I guess my concern with this is that it's comparing a service that was a really poor service, in my view, and in terms of the demand from the local community of where they wanted the fixed route bus to be and the timeframes for travel, etc., and comparing that to a premium service. And I guess I've shared through the Regional Transport Committee at the time my views on this, which was that I think it was far too cheap for far too premium a service, and there needed to be a bit of a sweet spot found. And I'm concerned that an extension and just a sort of a blanket extension of a trial, which has gone on for quite a long time, would just put more public money into something which we already know quite a lot about, and we can begin to see the amount of elasticity and inelasticity in it. But I don't think, as I've forgotten who it was who made the point, that I don't think we will get to the point where it will be a good return from the government's fare box recovery. It might have been Mayor Denyer who was talking about it. And so I'm just wondering what the end goal is, because for me, there are other opportunities to invest in public transport that are just screaming out loud that are not being taken. And both by regional council and by my own council, and we don't have a business case. We don't have any plans, as far as I know, for a date to do the business case. That was part of the reason from what regional council said at the time that it went ahead with this trial, was to integrate it into the thinking to then roll out the business case. So that's not going to happen in a timely way. And meantime, there are other opportunities for what I would call, I guess my own branding would be something like Baybus Flexi or something rather than on demand, which heightens expectation, but something which could put in place a different type of public transport opportunity in an area like Otumotai. And the reason I mention that is not because I'm the ward councillor there, but because you could probably scrap a couple of fixed bus routes there and save whatever that costs. Is that between $1 and $2 million per year, I think, in OPEX, and put that along with some other investment into a more flexible on-demand style service, but not quite as premium. And I suspect you would get a far better return, both in terms of the environmental benefits, the social benefits, and other things. So I guess for me, I'd rather see what the Local Government Act requires, which is a full range of options, and then for elected members to choose which are the most cost-effective options in terms of the social, environmental, and economic outcomes that we're looking for. So, you know, I'd struggle to support it myself.
Mayor Daniel.
Thank you. Councillor Crowther raised a good point, but I do just want to highlight a point in the paper where it says the staff recommended extension to better align the end date of the trial with regional council's annual budgeting cycle, while having enough time to procure the service if a further extension or permanency was recommended. So I'd really like to see what potential there is for the permanency and the lower contract cost, which will significantly up the fare box recovery, and which was a concern I highlighted earlier. So look, I'm happy to support the motion, but I think we do need to look at what the permanent solution is for this and how that stacks up.
Please.
I should know this and apologise, but are we receiving any subsidy from NZTA? We're not?
No.
Through the chair, we received subsidy for the first 18 months, but as part of the national government's agenda, that money was no longer provided for, I guess, items beyond BAU or investigatory pieces. But that doesn't mean that as part of the next RLTP process, we may actually get funding for it, particularly if we can show that it's successful. So that's part of the reason why, Mayor Daniels noted, we'd be closer to that funding round.
For example, does Timaru get NZTA funding? They do. Okay. I'm actually thinking that we should extend the trial, but we should still be trialling. And by that, I mean, we should be being prepared to be flexible and change things to try and find that sweet spot, to try and find the best outcome we possibly can from this service. So we've adjusted the fares. We're talking about adjusting the fares again. We've got some scope to fix that utilisation rate. So I'm in favour of actually giving it a really good go, and be prepared to change things, just so that we're in the best position to have a really good business case and a really good chance of getting NZTA funding if we decide to continue it.
Councillor Shirley.
On the point that Councillor Nees has just made, because I think it made a lot of sense. How are we placed in terms of introducing those flexibilities to really make it a trial and really push to get the best benefit out of it in terms of our contract with the provider? Does that come at a cost to do those sorts of flexible trials?
As long as we're not changing the base of the operation, we have pretty much free rein. So any changes to fares, it is the amount of time for us to make that administrative change and undertake customer communications. In terms of the metrics that inform, how the vehicles are dispatched based on demand, those are all changes that we can make behind the scenes. The only thing that would impact contract costs is if we wanted to introduce more vehicles, have the vehicles run more kilometres, those sorts of things that would pick up direct additional operational costs.
So we can test the flexibility of the elasticity of demand with price, and that doesn't impact the contract. Right.
Councillor Taylor.
I'd just like to make everybody think ahead about another 12 months. If we extend this to the end of next year, our trial is going to be then 30 months in the running. What are the public going to say when we suddenly withdraw this service, which has had big uptake? And should our comms be starting to accentuate the fact that it is a trial and potentially it will end? Because I think a big crowd out the front door asking for this thing to carry on.
One of the reasons for extending it is to get it in line with the renewed contract that we have for our other service. I'm with you that there will be an expectation that this will continue, but we need to fine tune the financial side to get it, to tweak it to get it even more fare box recovery. But the actual patronage, we've achieved what we wanted to achieve there. So I think there's room for more room in the trial. And you've got to remember that we only did the patronage, the fare box increase was only at 25th of April, was it? Eh?
28th.
Yeah, but around end of April. So May, June, we're only getting genuine data now on that effect. To change, to tweak it again.
Sorry, I'm just not sure whether you missed my message. My message was we need to be very good on the comms so the public do understand. I agree with you. It's very early days for the increase.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anybody else to discuss? You're looking like you're ready to go.
Not as mayor though. Just the only or the concern that I have was that if we see it through to December of next year, we've then possibly, would we get an outcome from NZTA as to whether there's like to be funding going forward, or do we have to wait until the end of the trial?
Yeah, it would be the latter in terms of it wouldn't be until the end of 27, I think, when the next NLTP would be delivered. But we probably have some early indications prior to that on what government's looking at, and we do get a bit of an insight earlier in that year as to where things are tracking. So
just one further point. I mean, when this first kicked off, it was very slow on the uptake and it looked like doom and gloom all the way through. To see the way it's come to where it is at now is something that I would certainly like to see it through. And of course, also, having a side bet with Whakatane perhaps going forward. So, all for support.
All right, I'm going to put the motion unless there's any other discussion. So the motion is 1, 2, B, and 3. 2A, sorry, 2A and 3, sorry. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Order 3 against. We've got 2 councillors and Rotorua. So that's the majority of the vote. I think we've got it on the voices. We don't, unless you want to show our hands and record it.
It's okay, I've got those.
You've got those people? Okay, then it's carried. Thank you. Carried with 3. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Hey, morning tea. What? Who wants morning tea? Oh, is it? Okay, we're going to. Did we ever stop for morning tea? 10:30. Oh, well, that's right. Yep, let's have a quick morning tea, shall we? Make it 10 minutes so you can bring it back to your table. So we're on to. Okay. Eastern Bay, is that the next one? Who's doing this one? Dale. You're ready.
All right, kia ora koutou. My name's Dale Clark, a Senior Transport Planner here at Toi Moana. Thank you for having me to present on the Eastern Bay Public Transport Network Review. I have a few slides to get through and I'll try and be as quick as possible so we have some time for discussion at the end. But just a bit of background. This review was initially envisioned as a bit more comprehensive when it was laid out in the RPTP in 2022. But due to our funding constraints, we've been limited to considering cost-neutral changes only. We have our operating contract up for renewal at the end of December 2026. And so procurement planning is underway for that, aiming for a October 2025 tender release. So completing this review is really critical to enable us to get cracking with that procurement and make sure it's timely and fair to the market. And that heads into regional council decision later this month. And just touching on the patronage of the network, not too much detail, but yeah, we did see a drop in patronage in the last financial year, which is not dissimilar to other parts of the region and around the country as well. And just refreshing us on the previous PTC meeting, so staff presented 3 options for the scope of the review under cost neutral settings. Option 1 was to do nothing, maintaining the current network as it is. Option 2 was to do some minor changes to the timetables to make sure that they were a bit more reliable, tidy up some areas where we'd seen consistent community requests for tweaks. And then option 3 was to include those option 2 changes, but look at a bit of a reprioritization of services around the sub-region, largely looking at where we could reduce services and costs in some lower used areas, such as on weekends and in smaller communities with lower demand, and use those savings to put forward to funding other improvements elsewhere around the network. And the committee selected option 3, but asked us to not limit ourselves to just those changes that we explicitly listed in that report, in that option. And that was to then take that option forward to testing with stakeholders and the public. So we have carried that out since that meeting. We've gathered feedback from stakeholders and the public. We had a feedback period over 3 weeks and received 176 submissions from the public and various organisations. And we really got good coverage from around the region, quite proportionate to the use of the services and the size of the communities that they serve. What we heard was that all the improvements that we intended to make were quite well supported, but the reductions that they were paired with were not very well supported on the weekend, reducing weekend services and coverage to those smaller communities, those being Matatau, Taniatua, Waimana, Paengaroa and Pukahina. People have come very reliant on those services, and removing access to those areas without an alternative was not palatable to them. We also had the hope that potentially community transport providers could step into those areas and provide that coverage. But after discussing with them, particularly Waka Eastern Bay staff, although they have a vision to expand and provide a service across the sub-region, they don't have quite the capacity yet, and facing capacity challenges, as Andrew, Councillor Isles mentioned earlier. We also heard a bunch of feedback around requests for improvements elsewhere, including higher frequencies, additional coverage to the likes of coastlands and southern parts of Whakatane, and improving bus stop infrastructure. We've incorporated all the feedback into a set of recommendations, and I will take these as read, but take any questions on the detail if anyone has any. But largely, we're looking at keeping those weekend services to some extent, perhaps with a frequency reduction, and keeping the coverage to those smaller communities by some means. We're looking at getting slightly creative with the vehicle sizing and how vehicles are utilised to allow us to hopefully make those improvements, but still retain the access to those small communities. In terms of next steps after this meeting, we would finalise the detailed network design and incorporate that into the procurement documents. We'd also go back to the public to just share a bit of feedback on what we've heard from them and how we intend to proceed without getting ahead of ourselves. We won't know the exact outcome until the tenders come through and we know exact pricing and what we can actually afford. With the procurement contract, we're looking at ensuring we don't limit ourselves to only a fixed route network. So just making sure that we have a flexible contract or some means to make changes to the operating model in the near future. That procurement plan is going to Regional Council for endorsement, for approval on the 25th of September. And then after that, we're looking to continue working on the Eastern Bay by reviewing the operating model. The current fixed route services are not quite fit for purpose, as we know, and we think that there's potentially a hybrid model incorporating on-demand and community transport into that wider sub-regional model that we could consider sometime in the future. And that would allow us to consider these in line with our LTP and LTP processes and incorporate any actions into the RPTP. And that's the last of my slides. So I'll take any questions.
Yeah, just opening up, you've given us your report, but it doesn't give us any numbers of the weekend, the 7-day service and what the actual numbers, because if I look at Whakatane to Apotiki, for instance, we're talking 40, down to as low as 40 and as high as 70 people a month. So it's a very small service anyway. And how many, I can't get out of your report enough detail to what is that, because the public will always say, if you've given them a service, as soon as you want to take it away, they're not going to be happy. So that doesn't mean to say it's the right or wrong decision. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Whakatanean don't pay a targeted rate on their transport, do they? It's only you do as well. So go through to Apotiki.
Chair Kara and Apotiki don't.
Yeah, is that what it is? Yeah. So we've got to look after our ratepayers is the key as well. So if it's a targeted rate directly on the ratepayer, then that can be a considerable cost. So I couldn't make any decision based on your report because I didn't have any, especially on the weekend one, because I didn't have any idea what the actual numbers were.
I don't have the numbers through you, Chair. I don't have the exact patronage figures, but I have percentages. So a typical weekend runs about 53% of the patronage of a typical weekday in the Eastern Bay. Not all services run on weekends, only the Ohope, Tauranga and Kawerau services run weekends. That that proportion is fairly consistent with other parts of the region. It's actually higher relative to weekdays than Rotorua and Tauranga. So you could say it's better, the performance better than other parts of the region, but yeah, it's not unusual to see lower boardings on the weekends than it is on weekdays. What we tried to frame it as with the public was a reprioritisation if they would accept those reductions in favour of improvements elsewhere, and it clearly wasn't accepted by them.
Chair, could I just, please, when I look at the numbers that Dale has got there for Kawerau, for instance, and I remember when Bill Clark was the councillor here, everyone wanted a bus service in Kawerau until they got it. And I'm not knocking them, but what the other thing, Dale, I have a bit of an issue with this percentage business. I'm a numbers man, not a percentage man. And if you've got 6 people in a bus every day in the week, that means there's 3 people on the Saturday. And that's a bit of a worry to me. And that's the sort of thing that I see. And I know that councillors in the Eastern Bay see it all the time. And people are always, we're a little bit different here. You haven't got the population of a bit close knit in our area. And they're always saying, you know, what the hell's all those buses running around, big buses with 2 or 3 or 4 people in them. That is an issue. But the other one issue that I've come across is health and safety. And particularly where buses are stopping in Whakatane, Burn Street, is a big issue. There's a lot of homeless people in that sleep rough. There's lots of, well, it's quite untidy. If you've been there, you will have seen what I'm talking about. They are there because there's a toilet block there, and that's why they stay there. But it is just for elderly people where they've got nowhere to sit because all these people are lying under bench seats and all that. So that's an issue that we really do have to address. But yeah, I fully support that what you're doing, but let's just be very careful about what we actually ask for here because we might just get it, and that's a bit of a worry. But yeah, those are just a couple of issues that I've picked up anyway. But everybody wants a bus service until they get it, and then you're sitting there thinking, where the hell is everybody? They're not here today. Oh, we're using the car today. So fully supportive of the staff, but let's work together on this, and particularly with our friends in Whakatane, because they do pay at this point in time. If you come to Kawerau now and to talk to the mayor about paying for public transport, I know what she's going to say. So that is a big issue. Cheers. Thank you.
Councillor Dennis. No, Isles first. And then, did you told me Dennis? Dennis and then Isles. That order.
I didn't realise you realised we were twins. Hey, look, in regard to the Whakatane Matatā route, which operates as a van, providing 2 return trips from Whakatane to Matatā via Edgecombe on a Thursday. I've only lived in Matatā since 1986. I didn't know there was a van that did that. I actually wonder if going forward we should actually advertise it on some of the social media down there. I'd be happy to help you out on that and chuck it on a number of the local ones, and the district council could chuck it on their council page. We have a lot of new people moving, retired folk moving into Matatā as a destination. So I actually wonder whether we could actually improve it just by, without too much expense, just sticking on social media. And maybe even while you're there, add in the bus that goes from Whakatane Matatā to Tauranga.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just to possibly correct Councillor Campbell with regards the bus stop, you are probably aware that, you know, our permanent bus stop in Key Street is inaccessible because of the retaining wall development that's taking place outside our eyesight. So we're temporarily around in Bourne Street. So that's only a temporary basis. The other thing is too, Dale, thank you. This report really has taken us a long way from where we were at with the rather unsavoury recommendations that were in the earlier report. So thank you for the work you're doing. Recommendation 3 there, where we're saying that the procurement plan comes before Regional Council. When did you say?
1 second.
25th of this month.
Yes. Is that, does it have to come forward that soon? Just bearing in mind this community transport forum that is in the process of being set up, can that have any input into that, or is it too late?
Through the chair, the community transport forum is really in its infancy, so any of the communications or conclusions from that forum won't be known until at least sort of mid next year. In terms of procurement, yes, we really do need this to go to the regional council, because it starts to tighten timeframes around when that contract would need to be remobilised to support ensuring that the work that Dale's done can occur. So I think probably the risk here is that if that doesn't happen, we would need to consider how we'd do that. So I really want to avoid that. But I think going back to the crux of this issue, if there's some areas where we could perhaps make tweaks or changes to the proposed network, we could potentially do that, but only within the proposal. And then the other comment I'd make is that this is low risk. This is all within current funding envelopes. So I think, yes, it's probably just some context I want to add, but in terms of the community transport forum, that won't have an impact on this, and the timing is not quite right.
Further to Andrew's comments, Councillor Isles, we want to give our community transport forum investigations the time to understand what role community transport can play. You've already acknowledged that the success of Waka Eastern Bay is a two-edged sword. You're so popular, it's hard to put the capacity on. So we acknowledge that there is perhaps a long lead time in terms of community transport potentially being able to play a more significant role in how we move people around the Eastern Bay. What we're looking to advise the Regional Council on the 25th is through a procurement options that allow us to continue the service in the short term, but not lose the opportunity to deliver on some opportunities in the medium term once the community transport scene is understood, as well as the opportunity to take on board the final learnings from the on-demand trial and what suitability that might have in an Eastern Bay context.
Thank you, Oliver. Just bearing in mind again, if NZTA or Regional Council want to put some funds Waka Eastern Bay's way, I'm sure that we can accommodate the exponential rise in transport. So just a thought. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the use of social media to try and get the message across. I think that's a great idea. I also think that's, and it may be politically incorrect, but try and get the message across for these services that aren't very heavily patronised, that it could be a bit of a use it or lose it scenario, that in fact costs are marginal, and while we're very keen to get to provide connectivity to our smaller communities, we encourage people to use them, because in a tight fiscal environment we might have to review the ongoing provision of the service, just to get some messages across so that people realise it may not ever stay forever if it's not used. So, and the other thing is around the flexibility of the contract. I guess council will see your proposal on that, but I do hope we're going to have much better ability to right-size buses.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I understand you're operating within a lot of constraints, financial constraints, but looking at the schedules and how certain services run on certain days of the week, and I understand the availability of vehicles as part of that, but I mean, is there a sort of a trade-off that you're understanding here in terms of what the missed benefits and revenues, thinking back to the on-demand discussion in Tauranga, you know, we need to know the fact that we've got, as not Mayor Campbell, as Councillor Campbell said, the days in Kawerau probably don't suit as well. You know, what if it did move to a 1 day every, you know, a once a day service on weekdays? You know, is there any information around what the patronage would be likely to be, bearing in mind the reality check that Councillor Campbell gave in terms of people backing up their talk with action? But, you know, is there demand there? Because it just seems like a bit of a funny setup to sort of go, right, I'm in Whakatane, I can only go to Poriki on these days, I can only go to Kawerau on these days, and you compare that to Tauranga. And I guess the issue I'd contrast is that in Whakatane, the ratepayers are paying 15%, same in Western Bay, 15% of the targeted rate that Tauranga residents pay. So it's not a matter of a total investment that I'm questioning. I'm just saying the per capita investment is so much lower there. And are we actually aiming too low in the Eastern Bay? Do we have any understanding, any analysis or survey data or anything to indicate the demands?
Through you, Chair, I've spent some time looking at the recent census demand, commuter waka, and yeah, it's difficult to gauge, but in terms of commuter demand, it's quite sparse between the three centres. But in terms of testing the level of service with the community, part of that operating model, part of those next steps will be to ask the question around affordability of these services. Are people willing to pay slightly more on their rates for a better service? Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves there too much.
I'd comment, I don't know if anyone really asked Tauranga people if they wanted to pay more on their rates to sort of get to the 300 and something dollars, but I take the point. I guess it leads to the question of whether the priority for the Eastern Bay, and maybe it's also a question for our Whakatane councillors, is it more sub-regional demand between the various centres and Eastern Bay? Is it intra-regional to get to and from Rotorua, Tauranga, or is it actually intra-community, you know, like a Whakatane, you know, within Whakatane service? Where would you get the best bang for buck out of that, or the greater demand?
Yeah, it's difficult to find that balance, but the network is generally a coverage network and trying to deliver the minimum level of accessibility to everyone at a very low cost. And so that's kind of where the network ends up, with very infrequent services based on that.
Just further to Dale's points, just coming back to your question around days of the week, councillor. So the reason that we don't operate every day of the week is because the bus that's serving one township on a Tuesday is then serving another township on another day of the week. So one of the ways that this contract has stayed relatively low in absolute terms is because we are working those vehicles very, very hard. So we don't have vehicles sitting in the yard to run daily services as things stand. As Dale said, most of the routes on this network are for coverage, and they were originally put in, if I may say, as services of last resort for those that had no other option to stay connected, with the exception of the Whakatane service, which is more akin to an urban route. What we are keen to explore with the simplifications to the Whakatane town service is, if we make that service more direct and journey times better, will we start to see the growth in that service and that become a proper town connector? Because in that instance, it might well increase the case for some sort of investment or some sort of better public transport offering for the residents of Whakatane.
Chair, can I just interrupt there a little bit? There's the service that councillor Isles talked about that they have from Whakatane, bringing people to hospitals and all the rest of it. That was set up in Kawerau too. And that service works very, very well, getting people here to eye specialists, getting them to specialists. And the most important thing is that it's coordinated by St. John's, and that way you don't get a disconnect in the hospital and surgeons sitting around there flicking pencils. But the big issue is the one that really concerns us in Kawerau, that when somebody gets discharged from the Whakatane Hospital, they're put outside. That's going on today. And so we have volunteers go and pick people up and bring them home and all that sort of thing, or the shuttle service works for them. So they're in and out all day long to Whakatane, to hospital, whatever. Sometimes go and pick up groceries for elderly people and that. But that's always, most days when I'm going home, I pass the shuttle going back to Kawerau and back to Whakatane. So it's really, really important that we probably do look a little bit beyond what we're talking about. But I take heed to when, like Councillor Brother said, the $300 or $400 that might be going on to the general ratepayer. When the general ratepayer and I go to dinner at night and they come over and say those bloody buses are all driving around with 2 or 3 people, or worse than that, no people. So if that's hammering it, they're just travelling backwards and forwards empty. So that is a concern to them, and it doesn't look good from anybody that knows anything about running a blooming business when they see empty buses going around. So that's a bit of a concern to me. And let's just get one thing straight. These people don't deny paying a little bit towards transport, and particularly elderly people. They can't even get down to the doctor. They can't get to the chemist shop. They don't mind paying, but that's why they don't want to wait for a great big bus or have to walk to a bus stop to get to it. And that's just, I know it's a tough issue, but it's something we just need to have that flexibility to talk about. And I think we'll get it right, but it's going to take time. But what concerns me, we might be pushing this. I hope we're not pushing this to be tied into a contract for the next 10 years. This month, there's also an election going on, guys.
Go on.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I mean, Dale's alluded to it before. Whakatane itself's got a population of approximately 16,000, but we're surrounded by those smaller satellite towns, whether it be Edgecombe, Matata, whether it be Taniatua, Waimana, or whether it be Ruatoki. And those towns basically have populations around about, say, from 300 up to about 500-600. So the frequency of a service is never going to satisfy the likes of the regional public transport, because it doesn't matter what you do. The infrequency of the timetable means people can either come into town at, say, 9 o'clock in the morning and then get a return trip at 4. But as Councillor Campbell also alluded to, we run the service where people have got to come in for a doctor's appointment, a prescription, or just to have social time at a cafe with their mates. That's a service we can provide at a nominal cost. So that's why I've been, forever hammering on about an on-demand service. There has to be something in between, hopefully, that will work. So that's what worried me with the early procurement that has to come before regional council. Is there going to be flexibility as we move forward, especially, albeit again that community transport forum that is really much in its infancy. But it's something that we're not going to solve it overnight. I fully appreciate that. As for paying more for our public transport, our ratepayers on the whole are really pushed to the max now. So I can't see that would be a very savoury option either. Thank you.
I don't think that needs a reply. I personally think that there's got to be a lot more work done on the east, and finding a way that we can actually support the local community work so that the residents do get some flexibility, and I think our dollars would be much better spent than having two people, running from Opotiki to Whakatane on a Saturday. That just seemed this Saturday business, and you say, well, it's 50%, but it's 50% of 4, so that's 2, and that's not viable for anybody. But aren't we better to put our money to a community-based organisation rather than running big contracts that are highly unutilized? I personally think that, I know everyone says we've got to have this done by the next council meeting, so that, well, the current contract runs out in mid-2026, so we're past mid-2025, but we're not that urgent in my view. I think we need to be working closer. I would like this to lie on the table for me, but that's just and actually see if we can't find a way of getting a better service, so that we have a restricted service of what we do, less, but put the rest of the money into the community service and build that up and actually partner with them. That's just how I feel on the thing. I think it's. Any other comments? Go on, Glenn.
Clarification, is what is intended to be put into the RLTP in terms, or into the, more importantly, the NLTP, in terms of, if you imagine, say, a change of government or a change of GPS, is this piece of work the thing that will drive that, or is that a completely separate piece of work, in which case when will that be undertaken?
Through the chair, I can probably cover that. So as part of the RLTP, when it starts to develop early next year, more so the later part of next year, we'll be looking at what levels of funding we want to put into our continuous program. So that's the pool of money that supports delivering public transport. So we'll be looking at things like what is happening with the current government, or what is looking likely to be signs of a future government, and what the GPS might say to help us put the dollars in the right buckets, I guess. So if we get a red flag down in Wellington, we'll probably be looking to put more money into PT again. But they're quite the opposite, I guess, if the current government was to stay.
I guess my comment on it would be that I don't see this as a very long-term sort of perspective, because I just think it does require a conversation. I hear what you say, Councillor Ailes, in terms of your community may not want to pay more rates. Certainly, I don't think our community did in Tauranga. But on the other hand, it depends what you get for that. And my quick back of the envelope calculation was that you probably get a similar subsidy per trip as the on-demand trial in Tauranga. So we've just done an extension of the on-demand trial in Tauranga. So why wouldn't the same logic say, well, you could expand services down there if there's a likelihood that you could potentially get a similar amount of bang for buck in that community? Because to me, the need would be greater in Whakatane, because you have a when you look at what is being offered, it is a lot less than what people say in Pies Par or Greaton have already as an option. And so there are workarounds in Tauranga that people often used to do, whereas in Whakatane there are, and certainly the collaboration with the community entity that is providing services along those lines. To me, that's an absolute essential part of this whole picture.
Through you, Chair, I'll respond to those points, Councillor Crowther. So what we've got here is an issue with timing. The contracts, as it stands, is up mid next year, and procurement does take time. So in terms of direction for staff, we do need to seek direction from the regional council as to what they would like to do with this contract on the 25th of September. The other thing is, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that a future state is likely to involve a more significant reliance on community transport, and that is something that the regional council has expressed a desire to explore through 100% funding the community transport forum initiative. And then finally, if we want to move to a different way of operating, such as on demand, we need time to pull together that business case to make a case to Wellington for that investment. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to achieve those things by mid next year. So we need to do something with the current contract. So what Dale suggested here is effectively an interim solution until we understand what that future case is. And to the comments that were quite rightly made around Tauranga on demand, I don't think it's palatable where we have a situation where there is no public transport coverage come the end of the current contract. So and I can't talk openly because there's matters around procurement that need to be discussed in public excluded. But we are looking to provide the regional council with some short to medium term options around the contractual arrangements in the Eastern Bay.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so what you're saying, Oliver, is this doesn't lock us into a long-term solution where some of the suggestions that have been made cannot be made later.
Correct. Yes.
I'm broadly happy with what we've got here, but I acknowledge that wider considerations, improvements might be made. But I hear what you say, that if we don't progress this now, then the contract will be nowhere, and these services might stop.
The more likely outcome is we have to go to emergency procurements, and then our costs increase substantially because of that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an opportunity for review of the procurement plan inside of the term of the length of the contract? Can it be reviewed? You say time is of an essence to get this into regional council's agenda.
So the draft procurement plan will be circulated with under a public excluded cover for the regional councillors to consider prior to the 25th.
Right. But would there be provision within that plan for review, considering the work that we're talking about today and the work that is going to be being undertaken? Because we've basically proven that the system we've got now is broke. So I'm looking for a way forward.
So as long as we're staying within the cost envelope of any future contracts, we do have the ability to work with the operator to make changes. So that ability would still remain. I guess what we're looking for here, and the way to get best bang for your buck, is to go out to the market knowing what you want, as opposed to going out with something a bit more spurious and then having to correct things once you're in flight. So what we're trying to determine here is, what do we potentially go out to the market with as our base offering. But yes, like with all of our other contracts, there will be the option to do things in flight.
Okay. You wanting to move the recommendation?
Second,
Ma'am.
Mr. Chair.
Did you second it?
It's happy to second them.
Okay, so it's been moved. The motion is sitting on page 65. Receives the report, directs staff to progress detailed network design based on the recommendations outlined, and recommends that regional council approve a procurement plan for the Eastern Bay network. Blah, blah, blah. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. we're going on to the public transport fare increases.
Thank you, Chair. I will do a brief presentation supported by Andrew and the team on this one. Just to provide a bit of context. So first of all, I just wanted to add some context through this at first glance slightly complicated graph, but please do allow me to walk you through this. So what we've got here is an index of some key metrics since 2020-21. First, I'd like to walk you through the solid red line. I mentioned earlier that we have base contract costs, and what you can see there is that over the 5 years on that graph, those have remained broadly constant, other than a dip when we ran less services during COVID. I also mentioned that we have other costs associated with our contracts that are embedded. The two that are, well, the one that's out of our control is contractually defined inflation. The dotted red line that you see higher up the graph is the impact of inflation on our contract costs. The other big driver was the decision made by Regional Council to provide some subsidisation to bus driver wages. Some of you will recall we had a bus driver shortage coming out of COVID, and the Regional Council made a decision to support the workforce to allow us to return to a full timetable. The thing I want to highlight here is the gap between the base contract costs and the dotted line. So inflation over the past 5 years has led to our operational costs being 30% higher. Is that out of kilter with what we're seeing around the country? The blue dotted line is NZTA's diesel bus index. So you can see that that's in the low 20%. So our inflation, when you consider the additional support that this council has given to bus drivers, is not too far off where the rest of the country is at. So nothing particularly out of the ordinary in terms of cost escalation. Other key things on the graph, the green dotted line shows our indexed bus boardings. So you can see that those have grown substantially over the past 5 years from 21-22. So those are up almost 30%. And then the pink line at the bottom is revenue per boarding. And this is an inverse of all the other lines. But actually, I appreciate this is now getting very busy. When you overlay some of the decisions that have been made around trials to encourage a mode shift, especially around school children onto public transport, you can see that those have reduced revenue per boarding, but have arguably been very effective in terms of increasing public transport mode share. Add into those as well the fact that for the best part of a year, we ran with half price fares as part of a government sponsored initiative during the COVID pandemic. The big takeaway I want to leave you with from this is compared to 2020, 2021, our costs have gone up the best part of 30%, but we are collecting about 16% less per boarding. So those two things have gone in different directions. So we have seen an erosion of that, but that is down to some explainable decisions that have been made, focused on growing patronage. So some wider context, which is set out in your paper. As everyone's aware, there's a ministerial expectation that fare box recovery will increase, and that is measured through private share targets. And predominantly in response to that, the PTC expedited a fares review, which was adopted by the Regional Council earlier this year. And there were significant elements of the fares review that required NTS to be in place to be implemented. And that's due to some logistical and technology challenges that you're all too familiar with, and I've covered in the report. When the Regional Council adopted the fares review, it was assumed that NTS would come in August of this year, which has now passed. So the reason that I'm bringing this matter before you today is to talk about the interim options for fares increases whilst we eagerly await the delivery of NTS. What do you want to do in that interim period, and what do you want to recommend to the Regional Council? The other thing I would add is through updated guidelines for the development of regional public transport plans, we are now required to have a policy where we annually review our pricing. So that's not to say that we have to do a fares review on an annual basis, but on an annual basis, the regional council needs to consider public transport pricing. It's assumed that that would happen through an annual plan, long-term plan process. So regardless of the recommendation of this committee, we will be asking the regional council to consider this every year, and no doubt the regional council will appreciate the recommendations from this committee in the future. So I've already touched on some of the limitations, and these are outlined in more detail in your report. What we're proposing is the option for a blanket increase in fares across the network. And I want to be clear that we are quite constrained in terms of the complexity of what we can deliver at the moment. We are part of a national consortium, the RITS consortium, and we rely on resource in that consortium to support us with things like fares changes. And those resources are heavily focused on working towards the delivery of NTS. So there is limited resource to support us with a complicated fares change at this time. So the option available to you is a blanket fares increase. That does mean that you don't have the ability to implement key elements of the fares review, including the loyalty benefits, which were some of the significant positives from that process. The other constraint is the lack of technology on school services. That's something that will be resolved through NTS, and we have investigated a number of potential options for charging school children, and we don't feel that there are any viable options that can be progressed quickly at this point. The other thing to note is economics suggests that in isolation, in laboratory conditions, if you put fares up, demand will go down, noting that there are externalities that may prevent or soften this impact. One externality, for example, are recent TCC decisions around car parking prices. So we expect that to have a positive impact for public transport and potentially limit the implications of any recommendation you make to the regional council today. So we've put before you some potential recommendations that you could make to the regional council. Option one is to defer a decision on fare increases until the preparation of the next annual plan. Option two is to implement a blanket increase in current public transport fares as quickly as practical of either 2.7%, which represents CPI over the last year, 10%, which pushes the adult fare in Tauranga and Whakatane to $3, 25%, which represents CPI growth from when fares were last increased in 2018-19, and finally 36%, which sees the adult fare go to $3.70 in Tauranga and Whakatane, which is in line with the fare that was headline fare that was endorsed through the fares review. One thing I will add is we're proposing that that these fares are the fares are rounded up to the nearest 10 cents. Just to give you an idea of what this means, these are just a sample of fares, so are not designed to represent every possible origin destination combination across our network. But if you look at the headline adult B card fare in Tauranga, you can see their current fare of $2.72. Fare review recommendation of $3.70, where the various four options would see you land between those. The anomalies that I would draw your attention to, however, are first that Rotorua does pay a lower fare than Tauranga and Whakatane, and there has been no attempt made to correct that through this process. As I've mentioned, that's not possible quickly. The other is the fact that for some of our longer distance trips out in the Western and Eastern Bay, the direction through the fares review was that those fares should be brought down. So picking up the bottom one, for example, adult fare from Opotiki to Port Tucker, currently $14. The fares review sees that reduced to $8. But all of the options that we've presented with you here would actually see that fare increase, and that's at odds with the fare review. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm sure there will be some questions and some lengthy discussion on this matter.
Daniel.
Thank you. I think the fair review envisaged some fairly large increases, I think particularly for Rotorua, and we discussed having interim price rises, which I think I supported at the time. So it doesn't seem unreasonable to have an increase now. However, the lack of the discounts to fare caps and zones means that it's difficult to have the large increases without the softening the hard edges, and those disproportionate increases for the or completely wrong direction increases for the provincial routes are just a killer for me. So the question would be: are those provincial are we able to keep those provincial routes, just flatline those, or is that just getting too complicated?
It's something that we would have to take away and have some very in-depth conversations. As I mentioned, our preference, given the amount of work the amount of resource that's being piled into NTS, and the fact that we need external support to make these changes, is that it ideally needs to be a blanket change across the region. What I do note, though, is a number of those services do operate on cash, so there might be some flexibility, but I'm not able to give you a definitive answer today as to the logistics of doing that.
Because I was, given all those points, I was favouring a small, 2.7 or 10% increase, but then I also saw the absolute minimal effect it has on the revenue and the targeted rates, and I just feel, given that, it's probably actually better to hold off entirely and do it once and do it right, because as we're just giving mixed messages to the community, the fares going up, it's going down all over the place, all for tiny amounts of money.
So for the problem we have is that we haven't adjusted the fares since 2018, and if I had a look at other regions and cities, and we're an outlier in that, and it's actually makes it hard now. And I for one think that we're probably better to concentrate on Tauranga and Rotorua, and not do the other one. I don't understand why you have to do everything at once, but I think we cannot afford to wait for NTS. NTS could be on the never. So we've already waited from 2018 to now. So we've got to show a commitment to central government if we want to get ongoing funding for public transport and across the board, unless we can show that we're actually addressing the issue. And so I think we consulted on it in before Christmas last year. We took it to our regional council, and they agreed to the rise in December last year, the last meeting of council, and we were waiting for NTS then, and there's no indication to me that NTS is coming anytime soon. So I think on the two big services that we actually have to address somewhere there.
And I wouldn't be opposed to that. It's just when you look at what it does to the Katikati to Tauranga to route, it moves it. Certainly.
No, that's why I'm saying. Yeah, that's why I'm saying we don't actually have to. We don't have to. We've got the discretion as to how we deal with it. If we think that those services were they're not well supported now, patronage wise, so they certainly can't go up. Probably. So we don't have to deal with that. And that's just my view. But we do. I think we are. It's really important that we actually make an adjustment on our two big services at least.
I would agree. So the point I was making though, even with 2A, which is the 2.7%, it's for $40,000.
Oh, yeah.
So it's more symbolic than,
Yeah.
actual raising real revenue.
So the 2.7%, raises, by my calculation for the Tauranga, would give an extra 7 cents from 272 to 279. The 10% would give 27 cents. The 25% would do 68, and that's in line with the CPI. So that I think it's got to be the minimum of the 25. Anyway, other speakers. We'll go Ken, Age Before Beauty.
Yeah, a bit horrified by that. You're not increasing the price, adjusting it since 2018. That's extraordinary. As I see it, option 2, 3, the 25%, that is really just catch up.
Yeah, that's right.
That is just CPI and the lack of action historically. We're getting a clear message from government that we've got to increase our fare box recovery. And some pretty strong threats, or not threats, but direction that if we don't, there could be consequences. We have no option but to go to 4, as unpalatable as it might be, because 2, 3 is just holding the line.
Thank you. I'm just a little bit worried about the impact on our patronage if we go too far, too fast.
Some of that since 2018.
And I accept that, but there were very good reasons for that. So my feeling is we'd be better to do a 10% at this stage. But I agree with Andrew and Mayor Denia that we keep away from those areas that are actually we were going to claw back the fare. So that's the other list. I wouldn't move those at all, but I would prefer to go 10%, because if you go 25%, we could have a real crash in our patronage, and I'm really quite worried about that. What can you give us an estimate? If we went up 25%, what would be the elasticity of that?
So we've calculated it as potentially a 9% reduction in demand. You would expect over a period of time to have a degree of recovery, and as I've already mentioned, there are other external factors at play that drive people both towards and away from public transport. So you would hope that over time that 9% would be sustained.
That is for 25%. So what would it be for 10%?
For 10%, we've calculated 4%.
I'd rather go with 10% for now.
What would a 36% be?
12%. One thing I could add is what we're asking for here is a recommendation to be passed to the Regional Council for discussion on the 25th. If it's the strong view of this committee that we need to treat some of those fares differently, that could be noted in the recommendation, and staff can do some further work and report to Regional Council on whether that is feasible or not, if that is the view of this committee.
Ben? And then
yeah, I'm sort of concerned about your comments, Chair, that we may not be getting, the new framework in at all of a timely way. So this is quite a big decision for Regional Council, and I kind of see all the sides of it. I guess for me, one of the issues is the Rotorua one, and if we're going to try to discern in terms of Eastern Bay, I think we should in terms of Rotorua as well, and do it on a sub-regional basis, because it always has seemed a bit strange to me, and you'll have to block your ears a little bit, Lyle, but I think Rotorua people should be paying more. But then the question is, at what point do you push the button on all this? And it just strikes me that we run the risk of just delaying, and meantime the services are, as we've heard, being run down, because we're not able to improve the services in Tauranga. They're getting caught in more congestion when we still haven't got, my favourite topic, we still haven't got the local service running 3 times per hour. from in my neck of the woods, you know, things like that don't happen because, putting it bluntly, regional council doesn't make these decisions to increase. And then it further declines the reliability in the service, which makes it less attractive. And maybe that's why patronage is currently going down. So I sort of see the tricky balancing act, but I do tend to agree that there needs to be something done to get more revenue in. And at the moment, I think hands are tied, and I can see the dilemma for regional council. But I just think you need to somehow get the basic services operating efficiently in Tauranga, get Rotorua people paying what I would call a fairer share towards it. And I would probably look at, from an Eastern Bay perspective, if the fares go up, to look at utilising some of what is a relatively small amount of money, to Mayor Denya's point, to go into improving any services that could be improved with that amount of money. And I think probably what staff will say is, my ideas might be nice in theory, but the contractual terms mean that you can't deliver on that. But if they can, to me, that's my preferred pathway, is to go. And I don't know what the percentage would be, but I can see the logic of going with 25. I can also see, to Councillor Nee's point, that could be a problem if it's coupled with increasing congestion in the network, driving down patronage. I'm probably not very helpful what I'm saying, but I haven't given you a steer at all.
That's a stop.
Yeah, my preference would be for the 25% option. There, and we need to do a catch up because this is costing us, number one. Number two, there will be opportunities to, and why I wouldn't go higher, is there'll be opportunities in the next 12 months to reach a bigger amount. Why wouldn't I go lower? Because that's just annoying people without actually achieving our goal. When you look at it, it's so someone catching a bus to and from work, it's around 2 hours of their wages will go on buses for a week. So if you think, is that reasonable? And I suppose different people will come up with a different answer to that, but it seems to me that that's a reasonable amount to spend on transport if the differential is using your own car. So I'd be in favour of the 25%.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Thurston, then I'll.
I know we're in catch-up mode, and I know what the government expectations are. And I hear your statement, Glenn, around a fairer share needs to come from Rotorua. I don't think her worship's with us. I think she would have really enjoyed being party to this debate, and I'm looking forward to my colleague Councillor O'Brien's comments. But as we've been saying ad nauseum on the hustings in recent times, you cannot compare Tauranga and the Western Bay of Plenty to Rotorua. The social deprivation in Rotorua is horrendous, and I'm sure Councillor O'Brien will back me up on that. To introduce a blanket increase, even 25%, I think would have a massive negative impact in Rotorua. I know we've been told by the transport scientists for years, you implement a fare increase and there's a dip in patronage, but it depends how long that dip lasts for. But I would just urge you to take on board some of the social deprivation issues that will impact on those that use this as an essential means of transportation, particularly in Rotorua. But I hear the catch cry of, government expectations, and everyone's got to pay a fairer share, but you can't get blood out of a stone. So I'd be pitching like Councillor Neves for about 10% myself.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully on board with the 10% as well. I think, again, we've got high areas of deprivation. We've also got the impact of rising costs left, right and centre around each household. So 10% also is going to have a 4% negative impact on the existing public transport network. So fully supportive of 10%.
So are you saying 10% even for the Whakatane, not just Tauranga and Rotorua? Is that what you're saying? Because you're
supportive of 10% for Whakatane as well. I appreciate we've got to review the cost. There's no denying that, but I think small steps at this point in time.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. Just to support Councillor Thurston, who said it brilliantly, I too attend. But for me, I would be prepared, because I think to avoid being a hypocrite here, on council, some of our things like pensioner units, we hadn't raised the rents over since the pre-COVID, and we did look at a form of catch-up to help recover some costs. For me, the 10%, I would have been happy to at least look at the 15. 25, I think is just too much too soon, even if that had been staged. But for me, the 10%, but again, I would be happy if perhaps that was massaged up to 15, but definitely 10 at this stage from the options presented. Thank you.
Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have a total sympathy with the comments made, sort of understand it, but we have a bow wave, an accumulating bow wave. By not confronting that, the problem's not going to go away. It's just going to get worse. And you may think you're serving the community by saying, oh, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. And the other side of that is nothing's free. It's a question of how you pay, when you pay, and who pays. And even you might say, oh, we'll increase the subsidy here with the accumulating bow wave, but all it means is people paying it through their targeted rate. You know, it's smoke and mirrors, and you have to face reality. You just cannot just have a rising bow wave as you've had since 2018 and not confront that now, because all you're doing is making that bow wave higher and the problem bigger and deferring it to the next council or the one after that. You can't run away from these problems. You can't bury it in sentiment and sort of feel good, oh, I've got to serve my community, because reality is reality. Same.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just remind the committee that we've already passed these increases earlier in the year. They should have come into effect in August this year. So essentially, if we do 25%, we're probably undercooking what we've already agreed to. So, yeah, I think it needs to be at least 25%.
I think one of the things we need to be looking at too is not just the amount, but how often we increase it. The old secret is that you do it smaller and regularly. And I hate to think that, and I think it's an important part of this discussion, rather than waiting for another 7 years and go, oh gosh, we need to do this. My thought would be that if you go for the smaller amount, even if it's the 10% or 25%, but you make it regular every year until your bow wave dies down a bit. So that's the important thing, is how long you're going to wait before you do it again.
Through you, Chair, in response to that, Councillor Dennis, so we do have the requirement now to review pricing levels annually. We will be touching on that this afternoon, because that will be a policy in our next regional public transport plan. We're yet to write a detailed policy, but my opening bid would be that every year CPI rounded up to the nearest 10 cents is the starting point for a discussion. I'm not suggesting we thrash the policy out now, by the way.
Just wanted to make sure that the forecast financial implications, they factor in those forecast reductions in demand built into those numbers.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And I guess what you haven't put there is the well, like in the main report, is the focus on the concession fares, which includes Community Connect, because I guess that's, to me, when I look at what someone who's on a community services card pays for public transport now, in line with the minimum, well, with the benefit rates, and also with the minimum wage, that it's a significantly smaller amount than they were paying in 2017, 18, when the prices last went up. So I guess that, to me, is a key factor. I know, to Councillor Nee's point, there's been a lot happening in between, but if you do a straight line comparison, it is a lot cheaper to go by public transport now for those people.
I'd like to move for that stage, that the recommendation 1, 2B3, that's 25%, and a third recommendation that recommends that staff investigate ability for provincial fares, I don't know if that's the right wording, but I'll say provincial fares, to be flatlined in anticipation of NTS introduction.
So let's be clear what you're asking for. Are you saying across the board for all?
So I'm suggesting 25% increase, which takes us up to roughly where the NTS level is going to be, but it flatlines those outlying situations at the bottom rows of that table there, where a 25% increase would raise it substantially above where we anticipated to NTS.
So just for clarification, would I be correct to interpret provincial fares as fares on non-urban services? So effectively fares outside of Tauranga and Te Puke, Rotorua urban and Whakatane.
That's roughly it, but I'm trying to capture those, and whichever wording works best for staff to work with, whatever does it so that those large increases, which we then have to reverse when we introduce NTS, I don't see point overshooting and come back again. That seems wasteful to me. Or confusing for the public at least.
Councillor Scott, open for discussion. Ready to vote on that?
I still am very, very concerned about the future of about next year for Tauranga, in particular, where you're going to have a lot of stress on the network. You'll have a 12% drop in patronage at the very least.
No, 9% at 25% is what it said.
No. Anyway, whatever it is, I'm really concerned that this committee will be ruining the day next year without the benefits that are coming through from the concessions that we'd built in, the other incentives for people to use public transport. I think this committee will be ruining the day that they put the fares up so fast without those compensatory benefits.
Suggesting then that until all the roading is finished in Tauranga, that we can't put bus fares up.
I'm not, but I'm saying you're going to have a hell of a mess next year.
Like, I think we're talking about next year when Tauranga will be hit by the transport projects. I'm not even convinced might be the year afterwards where that is a bigger concern. So that's whether that changes anything, but it could push it out again before we even hit the impact.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table. Any further discussion before we put the motion? So we're all clear on what the motion is? B3 plus the wording. Did you get that up there? Okay. You haven't put his third. Yeah. All right. Have you got it?
Stephen, don't you have to leave?
Well, he's writing in now. Non-urban rather than provincial. Could be, what happens if it's another 5 years before the NTS?
Chairman, can I just, I'm concerned that if we go with that option,
Yeah.
and you have the provincial rates as flatlined until NTS.
That wasn't, he didn't say till the NTS, because we don't know when the NTS is gonna be.
Is that in anticipation of NTS? So the idea is that you wouldn't increase it and then cut it back again when the NTS comes in. But, you know, I mean, if NTS comes in 5, 10 years, you probably want to rethink it in between, right?
Yeah, just to remain.
Mr. Chair, can I ask when these are going to be effective from?
Through you, Chair. So we've assumed in the financial modelling, January 2026. But it is technically possible to introduce these on the 25th of November. So we'll provide some more clear delivery timeframes when this goes to Regional Council on the 25th of September.
Because truly, I'm going to be voting against this as it is now. I would much prefer to put 10% at the end of this year.
Got a motion on the thing. so
I know that. I'm just
if this
giving my
fails-
reasoning for voting against it.
No, you don't have to.
But I want
You've
to.
spoken, no, you won't. We're in the middle of a vote. We're just getting the wording right. Once the votes happen, if it's lost, you get an opportunity to then put an amendment.
That's correct. I think the only aspect which maybe then I'll take advice from you, Ollie, is that it wasn't certain whether it was technically capable of doing that. So it was a recommendation that staff look into it. But if it's recommended to regional council to consider it in a few weeks, then that probably can take account of it anyway. But happy to be assisted on that one view.
Yeah, so staff will report the feasibility of the non-urban fares to the Regional Council on the 25th to consider as part of the deliberations there.
And perhaps just to explain the rationale a wee bit on that, I do think it'd be useful to say, except for non-urban fares to remain constant, in line with NTS aspirations or something like that, because otherwise it just looks like we're favouring non-urban over urban. But there's a very particular reason why we're doing it that way around.
Are you content for the minutes to reflect that, Your Worship, or would you like it in the resolution?
If the minutes reflect it, that's fine.
All right, so the mover and seconder are happy with that wording as it is? So I'm going to put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?
No.
Have a raise of hands.
Division, please.
Yeah, we'll do it by raise of hands. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried on the hands. Everyone want their vote recorded?
Yes. Division, please.
Thurston O'Brien and Okay, we move on. Whew.
Information.
Information only, regional public transport action plan. We're only an hour and a half behind. Page 88.
Thank you, Chair. We're on the home stretch. In the interest of time, I'll try to keep the next two items brief. So kia ora koutou, ko Katri taku ingoa. My name is Katri. I'm a senior transport planner here at Toi Moana. So starting off with the RPTP implementation and monitoring report, so page 88, item 8.6. So this is the second RPTP implementation and monitoring report since the first full report went to this committee in September last year. I'm happy to take the report largely as read, but we'll take the opportunity to point out a few things. So this report summarizes the progress to date on implementing the 55 actions and the 16 key performance measures in the current operative RPTP. So that's the 2022-32 RPTP. Overall, we've seen modest progress. So out of the 55 actions, 6 are completed, 23 are progressing well, 16 are slower than anticipated, 2 are not progressing, and 8 has been discontinued. Similar to last year, we note that several of these actions are at risk as they do not align with the government's strategic priorities for land transport and have been impacted by funding constraints in the National Land Transport Programme. In terms of the monitoring results of the 16 key performance indicators, we've seen some mixed results. So we have some targets that have been achieved, others have not been met, and a few are lacking targets and are currently under review. It's also timely to note that the development of the next RPTP, so the 2026-36 RPTP, is currently underway, and that includes a review of the strategic framework of the plan, so the targets and the actions, but that's on the agenda for the workshop pack for the RPTP this afternoon. That's a very brief summary. Happy to take questions.
Any questions? Councillor Crowther.
First question is on actions 1.1 and potentially 1.2. Have staff looked at potentially putting that action into the regional deal so that we actually have, along with highway projects, have the public transport as a core part of the proposal for economic efficiency in the regional deal?
Through you, Chair. As you're aware, Councillor Crowther, the deal is predicated around no new money. So from that perspective, we haven't considered putting OPEX for public transport into the deal. What I would highlight, though, is there's a number of infrastructure projects within the deal that would provide significant priority to public transport, which would support improved reliability and allow us to grow the network from a more stable base. So there is a lot already within the deal that does support the improvements to public transport that we're seeking.
I guess my understanding of, and far be it for me to comment on what's in the regional deal, I haven't got a clue really, but my understanding is that NZTA co-funding would be likely, or full funding would be likely for other projects. So whilst there is no money in the deal in the sense of cash on the table, there is NZTA 51% bar rate, which is being talked about. So I guess all I was saying is we've had this critical business case to deliver the connected centres plan for our sub-region. It is a regional deal to unlock growth in the sub-region. The way that it was agreed by all the partners to do that, including central government, was through AFTI. AFTI requires this business case as the top ranking project apart from one other, which is in the regional deal, the connecting Mount Maunganui. So I guess it just bewilders me that that's not being explicitly addressed. So I don't know if anyone else can comment on that, but. Yeah.
On that point, can I ask Oliver, with the Takatimu stage 1 and 2, which are both part of the regional deal, and the high growth predicted for Omokoroa, and 5 million roundabout was all about more housing there, and now that it seems the high school is not going to be built there, with the 4-laning, will that assist public transport in from Omokoroa?
Through you, Chair, it will. And our plan there is to actually keep buses on the current state highway, which will be significantly decongested through the opening of the toll road. So that will allow us to serve the communities along the state highway, current state highway 2 corridor, much more efficiently. The challenge we face on that corridor at the moment is running anything akin to a reliable timetable, just because of the significant disruption and unpredictable nature of that traffic. So hopefully some real wins there for the Western Bay once that project is delivered.
I had a question around KPI 8 and just trying to sort of understand the 5% figure. I don't recall where that came from, but having sort of done a bit of background reading, it just seems like an incredible thing that our KPI is to have up to 1 out of every 20 bus trips miss. And is that something which was determined by the current triennium, or is that an old KPI, or it just seems very low aspiration?
Through the chair, from memory, that's part of our contracts, so it's in our contractual obligations.
To me, that's sort of like when we look at what is said about reliability and look at what Auckland does in terms of its incentives to. And well, I'm not familiar with details, but some of their contractual arrangements in terms of incentives there, it strikes me this KPI is something that, to say we've achieved it, I mean, it's fine, we've exceeded it, so I think that's great, but I just wouldn't like to go into the next 3-year cycle and sort of stick to this as what our goal is. Like, the goal should be what will deliver a reliable service. And if 1 out of every 20 times you go to a bus, in theory, is acceptable, that you just miss the bus completely, that to me would be a big problem. So I guess I don't know what to do with that other than highlight it and say, could you maybe raise that explicitly in the next triennium when the next PT committee gets together?
Through the chair, you will have an opportunity this afternoon, Councillor Crowther, when we workshop the next regional public transport plan to talk about targets.
Okay, and then the other ones, I just wanted to understand the thinking on KPI 6, which is around greater than or equal to 47% of jobs in Tauranga and Rotorua are within 45 minutes travel time by PT from all dwellings in the morning peak in 2030. So we're presumably working our way towards 2030 and stop every year and have a look at where we're at, and looking at the census data compared to the baseline, we're seeing a downward trajectory in Tauranga, stable in Rotorua. But I'm just wondering if I actually understand what this target means, because does it mean that you could have a few hard to access dwellings, which in KPI 5, it said that 11% of dwellings were greater than 500 metres from a bus stop. So some are some are much further away. So does that mean that cuts back this completely, or is it not to be taken literally? Does it actually mean that, like, in other words, do you have to include your walking time to the bus stop, the bus journey, and then your walking time to the workplace? And if you take it literally, it says the percentage of jobs within that to all dwellings. I mean, there'd be a whole lot of jobs that are not meeting that. I'm surprised it's as high as it is because of the inaccessibility of a few houses. I'm just really trying to unpack this a bit.
Through the chair, that's a great question. So this is of the TSP kind of metric. We've got a external contractor to do some modeling on this, so I'm more than happy to dig out that report for you and share that. And it provides a bit more clarification of what the assumptions that have been used are part of that report. So more than happy to do that.
I think it'd be more useful to have, and maybe this is also for the afternoon, is to have the this, you know, to flip it around a bit rather than say the jobs within all dwellings. It's just to kind of go, you know, most dwellings is probably what we're really targeting, because you don't want to get swayed by the outliers. I'm not sure, I can't even understand how this stacks up in, say, in Rotorua, for instance, because surely there are some inaccessible dwellings there as well for public transport that you couldn't do it in 45 minutes based on my knowledge of their PT system. So I'm really questioning those numbers, but they are critical to me to what we are delivering, and to compare that with whakatane, I think would be really helpful, because I don't think you would get, again, going back to that previous discussion, you know, we're paying very different amounts of money per ratepayer in each area, and are we actually getting far better bang for buck in Rotorua than in Tauranga? You know, that's a question I'm left with.
I just made a comment to Matthew, who's running the workshop this afternoon, to make sure that we highlight these two. Thanks, Councillor.
Yeah. Councillor.
Similar question, the KPI 15, I think it is, the one about private share. Can't quite understand, with all the discussion we had on this earlier in the year, why we can't flesh that goal out and put a number on it. Like, it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple, I would have thought.
Through the chair, and I might take some support from Ollie, but a large amount of the reason for that is because we're still working through the transition from fair recovery ratio to private share targets. And while those have been set with interim targets been set with the agency, there's still some methodological issues to work through, including the wording there myself. So yeah, I think that's something that we are working on, and we do have ways of delivering that, but it's making sure that we communicate that clearly without misrepresenting the position. That might not be a clear enough answer. It's a slightly vague area, so I appreciate your.
I just don't think it's that hard.
We should have something ready for the next triennium once all the year-end stuff has been finalised.
The other thing, just to sort of put on the record, it'd be great to have sub-regional data or city, you know, territorial authority data for KPI 14, because ultimately, if someone's paying $300 and something in Tauranga, they would probably be helped by seeing the revenue expenditure relating to that service and trying to figure out what it is they're subsidising, and contrast that potentially with the other sub-regions, and probably sort of see the value that is there from doing that. At the moment, it's all just a bit of a, I don't feel I can do anything with that. We've achieved it, but it's sort of like, well, okay, we've achieved it, but what is the story that's telling? And there's a whole lot we've just unpacked behind that, which is not discussed.
Yeah. Through the chair, I think there's a balance there of how much of the community is actually looking at these targets online. So would we maybe be wise to potentially look at the number of downloads on this document, then determine whether those are at a certain level that it's going to take staff time to deliver that data set and go through that work, and would there be value for money in making a staff
well, maybe I'll
that,
rephrase that
work?
then.
I guess
And it's a good point, Andrew. In the first instance, to provide Tauranga City Council with that, because I have colleagues who are saying we're spending 60 million per year to run the bus service in Tauranga, and look at all these empty buses. And I kind of point out that it's not actually 60 million. It depends what year of the plan you're talking about that number comes from, and then it doesn't relate to Tauranga. So I think it'd just be helpful to everyone to try to get that. To me, that's absolutely core data, like what our ratepayers as a territorial authority are putting into the service is fundamental to them. And as they squawk at the incredible rates rises they've had in recent years, they have increasingly been talking to me about the public transport rates. So that may not have been the case.
Just
before.
remind them then that the Bay of Plenty Regional Council increased its rates by 0.2% this year.
Oh, I do.
0.2, the last in New Zealand, and it was the lowest over the 3-year period for the last 3 years as well.
Oh, don't you worry. I give you lots
and-
of
and
kudos for that.
And it's all thanks to this guy, because it's his team, most of it.
Through you, Chair, in response to your suggestion, Councillor Crowther, we the reporting that we do has turned into a bit of a behemoth. And just to Andrew's comments, we ended up in a situation where staff were spending more time measuring KPIs than they were actually doing the work to shift the needle. And there's a balance to be found there. And we have stripped some of our reporting right back, but it is really helpful to hear which KPIs, which metrics are useful for the committee, so we can make sure that we put those up in lights. So your feedback is noted. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions on this report? Thank you very much for that. That's you're happy to move it to be received and seconded by Councillor Thurston. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Annual survey.
Thank you. So moving on, the annual bus user survey. So this is on page 117, item 8.7 on the agenda. So again, I'm happy to take this report largely as read. So this is a summary report of key findings of the annual bus user survey, which is a mandatory requirement by NZTA for all public transport authorities across the country to carry out. I also want to note that historically, the council has undertaken bus non-user surveys, which are not mandated by NZTA. However, due to kind of low response rates leading to limited learnings, the regional council has decided to discontinue this part of their long-term plan. So they're not continuing going forward. So in terms of the bus user survey, it's conducted to support the council's understanding of perceptions, attitudes and awareness of users of the urban and the rural services across Tauranga, Rotorua, Eastern and Western Bay. In terms of highlights, there's a few. So the top one is that we are seeing a all-time high of overall user satisfaction, being up at 82%. So that's up from 68% in 2022 and 76% in 2024. This then recommends to more this then leads to more passengers being likely to recommend PT services to others, and that has gone up to 83% this year, and that's up from 70% in 2022 and 76% in 2024. The rating of value for money has also increased, and that's currently tracking at 79% this year, and that's up from 71% last year. And then when asked what could be improved about the public transport service across the Bay of Plenty, there's a lot of similar themes and topics of what we've heard already earlier today. So the most common suggestion has been improved reliability at 19%, closely followed by requests for increased services and more buses at 13%. That's a very quick summary. I'm happy to take questions.
Ben?
I'll weave in my question from earlier that I couldn't get in. The transit app, so it's this commentary around that here. In recent days, I've been made aware that like the extent to which the Royale service is impacting it, both from my personal experience where I'm kind of like, hold on, I can't access through my app, I can't see my route anymore, my preferred route. And And then other people have been telling me the same thing. There's posts on Facebook, etc. So is this a glitch that I know that the council stopped paying for that service, but is this sort of like a glitch in terms of, is it not meant to be impacting on the primary routes that are detected, or is this something that's going to be impacting this app from now on in Tauranga?
What's wrong now?
So through the chair, the regional council chose to move away from Transit Royale. So what you're experiencing, Councillor Crowther, is the free version of the Transit app, which only shows you, I think, your closest couple of bus routes. So if you're looking at planning a journey on a bus route further afield, that's not shown. The reason that was done was because the regional council has invested in the redevelopment of the website and a Baybus web app, which does give you all of the functionality and some additional functionality that isn't in the Transit app. This issue was highlighted at a previous committee, and it was discussed that we needed to do some more marketing of the new website and web app to make sure that people were aware that the Baybus web app is the better source of information compared to Transit. It sounds from the feedback that you're providing that we might need to do another push just to make people aware that there is a better source of information than the free version of Transit.
I guess I should probably confess I hadn't quite recalled that. I knew we had the updated website and I use it, but I don't recall the app being up and running at that time. So I can pass that on. So basically that will be I mean, maybe it's just I live in an area, as I think you'll be aware, Ollie, where there's probably more services than some, but it didn't show me my preferred routes on several occasions. And I think that's what people are finding in Otamotai. Perhaps as an exception where there are quite a few different routes going through there. So that's, yeah, it really impacts. So I think a publicity campaign on that would be incredibly helpful if at all possible. Thank you. In terms of this, the non-bus user survey to me was by far the most useful out of the two. In the sense from a city council perspective, looking at what is it that could lead to people using buses. And I think if you're a user of buses, you kind of know, I mean, that the reliability, etc. I mean, I don't think people will be reading this in this committee and going, oh my goodness, I'm so surprised that ranks highly and that ranks lowly. Whereas the non-bus user survey is quite interesting at times. So I'm wondering if there's a way for, through Tauranga City Council's annual residence survey, which comes in waves, I think we call it, whether there could be questions incorporated there around this and whether the council staff could potentially have a discussion to look at whether there'd be a collaboration, whether that's possible in Rotorua. And you know, I'm not sure, but certainly in Tauranga, I think it'd be really helpful. And if not, whether there could be something that could be done with Tauranga City Council to do every 3 years to do a non-bus user survey to actually get that information and then maybe help the planning in that 3-yearly planning cycle to see where the investment needs to go.
For the chair, yeah, I think that's a viable option, and we work quite closely with TCC staff. So it's just making sure that if we are going to take that approach, we're going to also do that at a region-wide level with all our sub-regional partners, or do we bring back the non-user survey ourselves? But we can look at those options to support that. But yeah, that was a decision made by our council to drop the non-user survey because it was not mandated and at cost with relatively poor uptake.
And the thing I'd add to that is we would be keen, if it was of interest to the regional council, to explore alternative methodologies. Because if we repeat what we tried to do previously, it got very low response rates and didn't tell us anything particularly useful or helpful in abundance. So we would want to understand, if we do that, how we actually glean some decent value from it.
That's why I think it'd be better to embed it in a survey that is happening anyway, and whether it's vital signs update or something, I presume that's still happening on a regular basis. So whatever surveys there are, I think a key component of it is to understand why people are not using public transport. And then the flip side is what the key investments would be ultimately, but the key factors that would lead them to potentially using it. And while I was having time to think about your previous answers, a follow-up question in terms of how come the survey then talks so much about the transit app and doesn't talk about our app or your app as regional council?
Through the chair. So we've taken the opportunity to include additional questions. So there's a set of mandated questions by NCTA so that we have comparable results across the country. And last year we've started to include some targeted questions about the website. And in the past it's been about the transit app. So we take the opportunity while we can. But it does highlight the in the future the opportunity to have a bit more in-depth insights on the things that are specific for the Bay, so that we can, in a meaningful way, report that back to our committee.
Further questions? Someone move we receive the report. Thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Ron. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Highlights. Last one.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is a very brief report that just highlights some of the successes of this triennium. I know this meeting has been a little bit doomy and gloomy in terms of some of the matters that we've been discussing, but I thought it was worth reflecting on some of the things that that the committee has achieved over this triennium. We have seen significant patronage growth. The on-demand trial has been launched and governed by this committee, as well as a raft of other things already touched on earlier in the meeting. Is the success of the ongoing support that is provided to the Ames Games, for example. But also some great examples of collaboration between councils. The one that I've pulled out here is the work with Tauranga City Council on the delivery and move to the new bus stops at the southern end of Durham Street.
Questions of Ollie? It holds me to thank you as staff. We're at the end of a triennium, the last meeting, and I just want to thank you personally and pass on to your team that the conscientiousness and the warmth that you show to demanding questions. You know, we like to test you, but our only interest is in quality improvement. And I think I can't say enough about the relationship that you've developed with Tauranga City, for instance, in this training. It's gone from strength to strength. You know, there's real value there for, as far as I'm concerned. I think big bouquet for you. You're not going to have champagne, but a bouquet will do. You and your team. Yeah.
Thank you. See if you thank us after we've put you through 3 hours of workshop this afternoon.
Yeah, but I'll be leaving. Amanda, you watch me. I'll put Ron Scott in charge. I got to catch the airplane.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Happy to move. I'll second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carry. The time is 1:24. We were going to finish at 12 noon. Thank you for your patience.